Welcome to the Kaiju Network podcast, where we have a very healthy obsession with kaiju. I'm your co-host Kent, and Jason. You're a straight talker, but be careful; it could ruin your love life.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
That's
I'm
from
not really
that's
much
from
of a
the
straight
movie we are
shooter.
going to discuss here in a little bit: Godzilla versus Destoroyah. So here we are. This is our first sort of, I guess, actual quote unquote podcast for the last couple of months, since we've been doing quite a few commentaries lately. And so we're continuing to go through our sort of re-reviews of the movies from Gojira all the way up to Godzilla 2000. So we're just about there. This is the second to last one we have to do in that re-review.
It's hard to believe we're almost at the very end of doing these, and then after that, we don't even know what we're going to be doing going forward.
Well, I have some ideas. We got a whole list of ideas, quite frankly, Jason, that we could do. It's just a question of where exactly do we want to go. So I guess let's just go ahead and kind of dive right into some of the news. First of all, Ultra Q and Ultraman have been released onto Blu-ray recently. And then also, unfortunately for those who are listening to the audio podcast, you're not going to get to see this. But if you are listening to the audio, just go over to the YouTube page and you can watch it. But we will also be discussing, and this is out already too, the Criterion Showa Godzilla collection. That is out on Blu-ray.
That is so much bigger than I thought. I thought it was going to be the regular size Blu-ray case. I didn't really think it was going to be like a big
I knew it was
going
to be a book, but I thought it would be like half that size. But yeah, this is like a coffee table book. It's hardback too. So we're going to be discussing that here in a moment. And then this Tuesday, Ultraman Orb and Geed will be coming out onto Blu-ray too. Both the movie versions along with the series. So with the Orb, that set includes both the series and the movie. Same thing with Geed. So you have those to look forward to this upcoming Tuesday. Hopefully this podcast will be out by that point.
Yeah, sadly, I have not even bought the first two Ultraman DVD or Blu-rays yet.
Well, here's the thing with me. Because when those were mentioned, including like this, and I'll get to all this here in a moment or so. With the Ultraman ones, especially the first two, I wasn't planning on getting because number one, I have the Ultra Q one. What was it, by Mill Creek or whoever it was a number of years back?
Yeah, I think it was Shout Factory that did those from Ultra Q, the regular Ultraman, and as well as Ultra 7. That's what they done until the was it Mill Creek Entertainment bought the or licensed the entire library to the whole Ultra franchise.
Yeah, and I like my Ultra Q copy. Sure, it's not an HD, but I will also... Here's the thing, and this will also kind of tie in a little bit with the Criterion collection, too. With a lot of the current Blu-ray renditions of some of these shows and films, my understanding is that they use a particular method called telecine, which isn't the highest end method of converting pre-existing film and shows into Blu-ray because it creates this grain. Like when you and I a couple of years ago discussed the Rocky series, I remember one of them, I think it was Rocky 2, I was telling you there was a lot of grain on that.
Yeah, and it goes with the same.
Use that method.
It goes with the same for some of the Heisei Godzilla movies that I also have on Blu-ray, and then watching them on the 4K TV. You can still see a lot of the graininess to it, but at least it serves what the movies are to be shown.
I mean, there are pros and cons to it. I might as well just talk briefly about it. Like the telecine method is a quicker way to convert pre-existing film into HD. The problem with that, though, is that because it is a quicker way, it's not able to fully clean, quote unquote, each frame or each section of film. So in certain spots, you will get kind of a grain or a snowy look to them. And that's the downfall. Really, it's still HD, but it's not the best quality of HD. What it will do just as well as doing a more methodical method is that it will at least make your colors richer. But as far as film quality, it begins to get hit and miss with that method.
Right.
And unfortunately, this is one of the issues with the Criterion set. But again, I'll talk about that. I think here in just a moment. But with the Ultraman sets, like the only one I've really thought about getting, at least out of the two that's been released, is the original Ultraman, just because I love that one an awful lot. The thing is, though, it doesn't come with the English dub track, and the only reason why I thought about getting it is just for richer color presentation. But then I'm like, even the DVD one, the DVD collection I got from Mill Creek here,
it was actually pretty good.
It actually, was really good. The only complaint I have about that set is that the English audio at times is a little muffled. Like, it's not the highest of quality, and they used a cheaper method to record that dub back in the day.
And then at times there were some of the English dub tracks that were missing, so then they replaced it with some of the original language in there as well, and then so on and so forth.
And you're still getting the full episodes anyways in that sense. So
right.
I just am like, I'm going to wait until after Ultra 7, because again, right there, I got a nice Ultra 7 set that I got like 3 or 4 years ago as well.
And same here.
So I'm just like, I'm going to wait, until after that. I'm only going to go up to, I think, Ultraman 80, because I like the older stuff more than the newer stuff. I'm just going to wait until.
I would at least still check out some of the newer stuff. I think a lot of that is pretty darn good for what they are. And they're at least still sticking true with the original franchise, but of course there's newer elements and storylines, plots, and everything. Yeah. But they'll still have some of the original people that have been some of the original shows back in the Showa days. They'll still have them in there from time to time, because I've seen Hirata come in and some of the other original Command HQ people and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and technically I already own every show up to Ultraman 80. I got them from a vendor at G-Fest over the last couple of years. I've only checked out Leo, and the presentation of those so far, from what I've seen, has been pretty good. I don't know about the other ones because I have yet to check those out. But I'm thinking about after 7, get the ones all the way up at least to 80 for sure. That way I have something that's official, and I know for sure the presentation is going to be of high quality.
Yeah, and I've at least watched all of Ultraman Leo. That one was pretty good. And then as well as Ultraman 80, that one was pretty good in its own right, because I was at Crunchyroll. They've licensed quite a bit of the Ultraman series, including Leo 80, and then Mabius, and I think Nexus, they also licensed that until they've licensed all the way up to Geed, and they haven't brought in, was it RB, and I'm not even sure if they have another one after that. I'm not entirely sure if they've made any announcements of a new series coming in.
Yeah. And so those are coming out for anybody who Orb and Geet are coming out this Tuesday, and Q and the original Ultraman are already out. So you can purchase those, and you have the other two to look forward to this upcoming Tuesday. Unless you have any other news, I was thinking about going ahead and diving into the Criterion Collection.
Yeah, there was a little thing that I just saw Friday night, and I've only seen the second part to this. It's like a little fan-made movie or animation that was recently made, and it's called. It's like using sprites like from video games, like the 2D pixel animation rips, and this person uses like some of the Mario characters, and then as well as Godzilla. And this little animation that they made was called Godzilla versus Coopzilla, and it's where like the premise is where Bowser had a dream of like some sort of prophecy where he confronts and fights apparently like a monster called Gigantus, and it's using the 1955 look of Godzilla and everything, but then they use the 90s version of Godzilla in this, and Bowser confronts Godzilla and tries to battle him and everything. It's a pretty entertaining like little fan made movie on YouTube. There's 2 parts, and each of these 2 parts are about an hour and a half long. I would suggest checking these out whenever you have the chance. They are pretty good. There's not really dialogue. They have like little subtitle, like little things there. They'll make like little voice recognition here and there, but it's not like full on like dialogue or anything of the sort. So, like I said, whenever you have the chance, I would suggest checking out Godzilla versus Coopzilla on YouTube.
It does sound like it'd be pretty fun.
It is. I think it's actually pretty entertaining with the story and everything that they've come up with for this. And from the looks of it, they might do more in the future.
Awesome. All right. Are we ready to dive into the Criterion Collection?
Criterion Collection? You mean Godzilla vs. Destoroyah?
No, the Criterion Collection.
Well,
I'm going to discuss this.
Well, for me, I don't even have the Criterion Collection.
Well, I know, but I'm just wondering if there was any other news you were going to present.
I really don't have anything of the sort.
All right.
As far as news.
So then I'm going to go ahead and talk about this. First of all, anybody who's listening to the audio version of this and you want to look at some of the, if you want to look at the actual just set itself and maybe some of the pictures I'm going to show here over the next few moments, the best thing to do would be to go to our YouTube channel and fast forward up to this point in the podcast so you can see what it is I'm displaying. So to start out with, this is its size.
Just and to butt in for a little bit, I thought, when I was seeing the pictures and everything, the way I thought it was going to be just a regular size Blu-ray, maybe like a special edition type of collection there. I didn't think it was going to be an actual size or maybe like an extra large coffee book table. Like it is right there.
I knew it was going to be a book, and I knew it was going to be decent size. I didn't think it was going to be this size. I thought it was going to be like half this. But at the same time, I think it sort of makes sense considering there's artwork in here. So like here's just like a preview of just one page. So like it displays the artwork, and I guess too you can read the writing a little bit better too with it being this size.
All I can just see is yellow blocks. That's about it.
Well, I know. I know, but this is kind of hard to hold with like one hand, especially. It's interesting because the Godzilla fandom is blowing up over this thing.
And I'm not entirely the reasons like blah blah blah. What's really the deal about it?
First of all, I'm going to play the centrist here, and that usually doesn't happen. Usually I pick sides, but this time I'm going to be the centrist when it comes to an issue in the Godzilla fandom. First of all, there's a side that's kind of really heavily criticizing this for whatever reason. Some people are complaining it's too expensive. Some people are saying there are no dubs. Some people are complaining about lack of materials or whatever, supplements or what have you. Then you have another side of the spectrum, which is saying, you're getting a brightly colored book, you're getting HD resolutions, you're finally getting an official release of King Kong versus Godzilla, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to be in the middle on this because I think there are pros and cons to this. the Godzilla fan who just needs to relax and just try to.
And then the one thing I would like to add into this is that one of the things with it being expensive for the way it is, I think they're with Criterion, they're actually counting in the amount per movie, which adds up to the amount it is for what is, because I think what you've mentioned or from what I've seen, I think on average is maybe around $8 to $9 per movie in this collection.
More than that, technically.
And then the other thing, when it comes to the Criterion collection, they necessarily have not done anything like bringing in dubs or anything, because I have quite a few of the Criterion collections as far as was it Yojimbo, Sanjuro, High and Low, all these other kinds of classic Japanese films. And for many of them, I don't think I've really have seen a like a dub version. They've usually have gone with the original language along with the subtitles for a lot of these classic films. So for me, it's really not a surprise with what Criterion has approached all these Showa films for the Godzilla franchise.
Well, and there are actually some dubs on here, including the Universal Americanization of King Kong versus Godzilla.
Right.
I was going to say this till a little bit later, but I might as well talk about it now because we were talking about price. This thing right now, at least on Amazon, is going for $112.46. I think even though I already own all these films, including a Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla, considering the fact you get the first 15 films and you get a supplement disc with some documentaries and a few other things on it, you also get whoops, that's towards the very end, I think. Wait a minute, what is this? I don't know if I've seen. Oh, that's different. I didn't notice that before. But like you get like a little bit of information written by Ed Gajaszewski, about each film, and then Steve Reifel has like a 3-page introduction towards the beginning of the book, as well, kind of talking about the start of the Showa era and everything. So for $112, I think that's really good for 15 films.
It's a really good deal, I would say.
And you get you technically get 16 films if you count the American version of King Kong versus Godzilla and the Japanese version separately. So considering all that, I think it's actually, from a price standpoint, is good. However, first of all, do not buy this off of people from eBay. No. I have seen the average price on there go for between $269, $270. That to me is way too expensive for something like this.
And two, it's just sort of a ripoff, and then plus they get a lot of profit off of that too.
And I've even seen some people who bought this from a brick and mortar store where they had a price sticker on it. And I saw one person, they bought it from a store and the price on that was $225.
Damn.
And even that I thought was too much. And I would even say, look, if you are a brand new fan or you're a fan who missed out on some of these films when classic media brought them out in the mid 2000s, that's still, in my opinion, way too much to spend on something like this. Even though it's a real nice set, I still think that's way too expensive.
So I would
considered
definitely suggest looking into getting it on Amazon, or possibly wait until maybe Black Friday if you're one of those type of shoppers. It should at least maybe be on a good, decent retail price, maybe a certain amount of off on the deal. If one of these retail stores plan on reducing the price for the limited amount of time for Black Friday or the Thanksgiving weekend.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to dive a little bit into this. As I said, this book is massive. Also, like I showed you earlier, each film has a little, not really a little blurb, but some information about it written by Ed Gajaszewski, along with some of the cast and credits. um, for each film. Each film has a different artist who was commissioned to do some art. So this one was done by Arthur Adams for King Kong versus Godzilla. Here, whoops, we already saw that one. Let's show something different here. This one here. This one was done by Mona Robot for Ghidra, the three-headed monster. Also, this set comes with 8 discs. Here they are. And the 8th disc is the supplemental disc, and that's the disc that also has the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla.
I really like the presentation and how they've made for
Technically, there's 17 films in this set because I forgot that there's a the Godzilla King of the Monsters version in this as well. Also on the supplemental disc are some extras, like an interview with Ishiro Honda by Yoshimitsu Banno in 1990, a special effects documentary that shows some unused footage from Destroy All Monsters. There are trailers. There's also, for example, an interview with critic Taro Sato from 2011. There are also interviews with other cast and crew members such as Bin Furuya, Sugotoshi Komada, Haruo Nakajima, and Akira Takarada, composer Kiri Fukube. I mean, there's some decent extras on that supplemental disc. The discs, as far as being able to get them out, are actually a little difficult to get out.
Yeah, just the way it looks, it's like it seems to be little sleeves.
Yeah, you gotta kind of like dig your fingers off the edge and then slide them out that way. So it's a little difficult to get those out. It's not terrible, but it's a little tough. The artwork and presentation of this thing obviously is beautiful. Like, I think every artist did a wonderful job. Like, here's what artist Sophie Campbell did for Destroy All Monsters. This one, even though this isn't my favorite of the Showa era, I really like this one, I think, the most out of this particular set here. So there's like Godzilla versus Hedorah. I think this might be the most detailed out of all within the set, perhaps.
Who did that one there?
This one was done by Jeff Darrow.
Okay.
So yeah, there's that. There are international dubs of Invasion of Astro Monster, Son of Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and Terror Mechagodzilla. So there are a few dubs on here. And as well, like I said just a moment ago, there is Godzilla King of the Monsters, the American edition on here. And then there's also the American version of King Kong vs. Godzilla as well. So you have a handful of films with an English dub on them, which I thought was strange. And for those who got angry at this set for not containing the English dubs, first of all, that's not entirely true, because I just stated films that have dubs on here in this set. Second of all, I thought it was mentioned pretty early on that no dubs were going to be on this set, and I was actually surprised there were dubs on here, because I thought they said no, these were just straight up Japanese editions or cuts of the films. So that actually was a pleasant surprise to me to find out that at least some of them there were dubs available.
Right.
So yeah, like there are some films on here with dubs. And second of all, like I said, when this set was announced pretty early on, it should be no surprise that you shouldn't have expected dubs with this in the first place. So as far as the high definition quality, we were kind of talking about this a little bit ago with some of the Ultraman stuff. The HD quality is not as good as some claim it to be. In fact, I couldn't tell a big difference between some of these movies and a few of my DVD releases, such as Invasion of Astro Monster or even Mothra vs. Godzilla from Classic Media. Even the difference between this version of Godzilla vs. Gigan and my Sony DVD version of this from like the mid 2000s, with the exception of a couple of moments in terms of maybe the color being a little bit richer, there still wasn't that big of a difference. And Yeah, that really was the big thing, and like I mentioned earlier, some of the picture quality with the Criterion Collection had grain on it due to the HD processing. And again, just to kind of reiterate, they used a process called telecine, which isn't the best method to do HD because it's just a faster process. Whereas with 4K and other methods, they do it frame by frame. This kind of does everything all at once. So it's just a faster method to convert uh, film into HD quality. And Toho unfortunately didn't want a higher HD resolution with this set because they are currently working on releasing 4K versions of these movies in Japan. And they didn't want this set competing with what they're going to do with their 4K editions, which I think is a dick move on Toho. Because
that's really not a shocker, to be
it's
honest.
not, but it's so stupid because first of all, this is region A. These will only work over here anyways.
Well,
and what they have will only work with their players.
Well, not only here, but in Japan as well, because was it Region A for Blu-ray works for both Japan and here in America.
I guess that's true, and this is Region A.
Yeah.
So, but Toho. Another drawback I have about this set is that the subtitles are in white, which I think in some cases makes for difficult reading. I remember, what was it, last year or something, when I bought the Criterion version of Gojira.
Well, do they at least have like black stroke around the text or anything?
Not really.
Really?
Not really. It's very thin black, so it's still hard to read in some cases, depending upon what's being shown on the screen. But like, I remember when I bought the Criterion Gojira one here like a year or so ago, and I remember talking about it on this podcast, and I said that, in my opinion, was the biggest drawback to that release, was that it was incredibly difficult to read the subtitles for that version, but I've kept it because there were certain extras involved with that I wanted to have. So the subtitles is kind of my biggest complaint with the presentation, outside of the occasional grain with some of the pictures. The biggest selling point, I think, for a lot of people, even for longtime fans, is going to be that this has the first official release here in the US of the Japanese cut of King Kong versus Godzilla. And so for me, I already owned a copy of this film, and I
think I might have that too with the one version that you gave me.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and I briefly compared the picture quality, at least, of the two films, the one from this and my DVD. And again, similar to like with Invasion of Astro Monster I talked about earlier, I couldn't tell a huge difference in picture quality. So kind of my final thoughts on this set. Is it worth it, and would I recommend buying it? So I'm actually going to read my final thoughts here. First off, for someone like myself who's been a Godzilla fan for nearly 30 years and was able to purchase some of the earlier DVD releases of these films in the mid and late 2000s, this set really isn't worth it. That's not to say I hate it. On the contrary, I love it, but I had a hard time justifying double, even triple dipping on some of these movies. As I stated earlier, I already owned a copy of the Japanese cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla, so personally, that wouldn't be a selling point for me, personally. The artwork is beautiful, but I really can live without it. I love the artwork. That's not to say it's crappy. In fact, it is gorgeous, like I've been saying earlier. Let me show you another one of my favorite pieces of artwork in here. I like this one. It's simple, but I like it. This is Godzilla Raids Again.
And then for me, I think I probably will end up getting this set. I would say at least the selling point for me, because I don't have, I would say at least a few of the other show-off movies, including Son of Godzilla, and I think maybe Terror America Godzilla, and I forget which other one that I don't have in my collection of Showa films, but I would at least, for the selling point for me, it would at least be some of the movies that I do not have, which some of these other distributing companies no longer sell anymore, simply because they either have gone out of business or have been bought out by another company, and just, or like a license for that film is, has long since been expired. So that would be my only selling point to getting this set.
So I'm going to continue with my final thoughts here. So I was saying the artwork is beautiful, but I personally can live without it. The information on each movie, while great, is information I can get from reading a couple of books on the Godzilla franchise I already own, such as Steve Rifle's Japan's Favorite Monster and David Cowlit's a critical critique and filmography of Godzilla. That's not the actual title, but anyways, the subtitles are tough to read at times as well, and I'm curious as to why they didn't use a color like yellow to make it easier to read the subtitles. That part is incredibly frustrating. So it comes down to HD resolution, the supplements, and having all the Japanese version of the Showa era films. As for the HD resolution, I couldn't tell a major difference between this and some of my previous DVD and Blu-rays of some of these films. There's grain on some of the picture, which can be distracting. The supplements are decent. The interview with Honda is enlightening, and the effects documentary is interesting, but not something I'll visit often. As far as having all the Japanese version of the Showa era, I'm happy to have them, but my set was more than half complete already. Again, that's not to say I dislike having all 15 of these films in their original format. It's just that by and large, we got those and from many of the initial DVD releases over the last 15 years. So for longtime fans, this set may not be worth it unless you need the Japanese cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla and/or are a completist. As for fans who maybe knew or missed out on many of the DVD releases of these films in recent years, then yes, I would recommend buying this set. Be aware, though, that there are only a few dubbed versions of these films, those films I mentioned earlier in this discussion. Overall, it's a set I highly recommend to new fans and fans who missed out on purchasing some of these films within the last decade and a half. Otherwise, for longtime fans like myself, it comes down to whether you want or already have the Japanese cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla, you want some of the supplements, and if you are a completist. Awesome. So those are my thoughts on the Criterion Collection. Again, I think for longtime fans, like I said, unless you need a Japanese cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla or are a completist, I find it hard to justify purchasing it. But even then, like I said, if you buy it on Amazon for $112, I think that's actually a pretty good price, considering you're getting technically 17 films and some decent supplements. The supplements I was more disappointed in. I didn't think many of them were exceptional. Some of them are really good, like the Honda interview. But otherwise, some of the stuff I thought was okay or decent. The trailers were kind of nice, but again, you can find those almost anywhere. So,
right.
With that, let's move on to Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. This is the 22nd Godzilla movie in the franchise, and it was released December 9th, 1995, produced by Shogo Tomiyama, written by Kazuki Omorai, special effects by Koichi Kawakita, music by Akira Ifukube, and directed by Tako Akawara. It stars Megumi Odaka, Yasufumi Hayashi, Takuro Tatsumi, Saburo Shinoda, and Yoko Ishino.
It's hard to believe that this film has been out for nearly 25 years, coming up next year.
I know, it's it's just crazy.
And when time flies. Yeah, and when it came here to the United States, it was already at least a few years old, because I think it came out was it around
early 99, I think.
98 or 99, one of those years there.
It was early 99, I remember, because 98 you had that influx of VHSs like Destoroyah, Monster Son of Godzilla, Godzilla 1985, Terramech, Godzilla Invasion of Astro Monster, etc. And it wasn't until like very early 99 when you saw Space Godzilla and Destoroyah come in, and then early 2000 came Godzilla vs. Godzilla 2, which I remember I was like, that was an odd one to just all of a sudden like show up. It was really weird how that worked out, but
Yeah, because I remember '98 when we vacationed here in Minneapolis with when it was just you and me and the parents. Uh, I remember us getting a bunch of like Godzilla figures, especially with the '98 version of Godzilla, the American version. And then I also remember us getting quite a few VHSs over at the Mall of America, and remember getting Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, this one here that I'm wearing. And yeah, I just remember us just binging on anything Godzilla during that year.
That's
Or
basically
for
all
like
we
the last,
bought. Yeah,
yeah,
was
yeah, for
Godzilla
like the next
stuff.
couple of years.
Yeah. So, as always, what we do, I'm going to do a plot overview of the film. So, Bass Island is destroyed by an underground volcano. Godzilla's gone uber nuclear, and scientists at G-Force believe the eruption may have influenced his state. Godzilla's son is nowhere to be found and is presumed dead. Ken Yamane, grandson of Dr. Yamane, believes Godzilla will soon explode, destroying the Earth with him. He advises the self-defense force not to engage Godzilla with traditional weaponry, as this could trigger the explosion. Microcrustacea infiltrate an aquarium, dissolving all the marine life they come in contact with. Dr. Ijuin, Ijuin,
Whichever.
I'm gonna call him.
The guy.
I'll call him Dr. Edge. That's what I'm gonna call him for the rest of the podcast. Dr. Edge.
The one with the glasses.
No, the actual scientist. That's
the one with the
messing with micro oxygen.
Okay.
Yes. Dr. Edge finds that the crustacea originated near the area where the oxygen destroyer was dropped and activated in Tokyo Bay. He realizes the crustacea were formed using a similar formula his current micro oxygen project uses. In the eastern industrial district of Tokyo, larger destroyer aggregates appear and create havoc. The police are sent in with military-grade weaponry, but are soundly defeated. Yukari Yamane, granddaughter of Dr. Yamane and sister of Ken Yamane, who's covering the event for her news station, barely makes it out with her life. Godzilla has a nuclear power plant in his sights, but the self-defense force sends in the Super X-3. The mech is loaded with freezer weapons and cadmium missiles with non-explosive heads. The Super X-3 is able to successfully freeze Godzilla and to slow his rising temperature. It even drastically slows his nuclear fission. However, a number of hours later, his temperature dramatically spikes, and Ken Yamane now believes Godzilla will experience a meltdown when his body reaches 1,200 degrees. Godzilla's son is finally located, and the eruption of Bass Island increased his growth, making him Godzilla Jr. Scientists realize Godzilla has been following his son to the Bering Sea, but due to his rising temperature, he will not make it. The destroyer aggregates combine themselves into a larger destroyer. It wreaks havoc in Tokyo until Godzilla Jr. shows up and battles it. Destroyer pins Jr. and inserts micro-oxygen inside him. Jr. then blasts his beam at Destroyer, knocking it backwards and momentarily defeating it. Godzilla reunites with Jr., but the reunion is short-lived. The Destroyer reemerges bigger and more powerful. Destroyer grabs Jr. and releases him from such a height that the fall kills Jr. Enraged, Godzilla engages with Destoroyah. The two kaiju trade blows until the self-defense force uses its freezer masers and Super X-3 to kill Destoroyah. Godzilla's body temperature reaches 1,200 degrees and begins to melt down. With the help of the masers and Super X-3, Godzilla isn't able to destroy the world as he melts down. Godzilla's final moments create a teary response from Mickey and several other onlookers. The immense radioactivity that Godzilla's meltdown unleashed surprisingly is disappearing at a rapid rate. Through the haze of the meltdown, Godzilla Jr. emerges, revived as a fully grown Godzilla, roaring as the screen fades to black and credits roll. So, I want to quickly just start off, and I forgot to do it for this. This film, at least here by some Americans that went to go see this film in Japanese theaters back in '95, many American fans did not seem to care much for this film at the time anyways. I don't know if some of their opinions have changed with time or what, but I have a G fan, And it's got numerous letters from people who went to go see this in Japan, including some people who are very prominent in the Godzilla fan community, at least here in the Western Hemisphere. And I remember one individual in particular, whose name I'm not going to mention, really lambasted this film. And I don't know if his views on this film have changed over time or not. I mean, the only one way to know is to ask him. But he was pretty critical of the film. Years past, I've always viewed Godzilla vs. Destoroyah as one of the, not just one of the better films in the Heisei era, but also one of the better films in the entire franchise.
I would at least say the same thing too after watching the film over the years and up until watching it just this morning here before our show. And yeah, I think the film itself just gets better and better. Even with seeing it for the very first time just about a couple decades ago, I thought it was a really good film.
Yeah, I hate to do this. I keep making this mistake on this podcast, but I kind of accidentally show my hand a little bit, if not entirely, early
I think
in
both
the
of us
discussion.
have.
Well, like I said, in years past, I always thought this was one of the top films in the franchise. With not only time having passed, but also the fact we got more Godzilla movies out now since, 95 and the early 2000s. My opinion sort of on some level changed a little bit, but then when I watched this here the other day, I'm like, wow, like why have I been sort of not really avoiding, but haven't watched this as often as I should, because I really got engaged with the film. I don't think it's by any means a perfect film. In fact, as we go along in this discussion, I think this film could have done either certain things better or missed out on certain opportunities to really, again, make it better. I'm disappointed in a few areas of this film as well. And again, we'll kind of we'll talk about this as we go along.
Yeah. There's at least a few things from what I've seen recently that I just finally have noticed after many years of watching.
I know it's strange. Well, and like we do on this podcast, we're huge fans. We love all of these movies. Shin Godzilla kind of being an exception, but
yeah.
But we try to look at them with a more critical eye to try to be objective, and it's kind of tough to do. I don't think anybody's fully objective, just because you're always going to come into something, no matter how hard you try, with some bit of bias and any baggage, good or bad, that you have with a film or a book or whatever it is you're talking about. So yeah, let's just kind of get right into some of the discussion again. I think the opening to this movie, even though it's not the first thing you see, the opening with Godzilla attacking Hong Kong, I still think is really one of the greatest moments in the history of this franchise. It is first of all, a little nitpick.
And this is a good thing that you at least brought this up, because there's at least a couple of shots within this entire Hong Kong scene that I just finally realized, and I don't know if this is the thing that you were going to be bringing up, is that when they have Godzilla rampaging on through the background of Hong Kong, in the lower parts,
foreground,
like in the foreground,
that's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, you see people actually walking along the sidewalks, just minding their own business.
Or buses going towards Godzilla.
Yeah, and you would think that Toho, when they were filming these things, or if they use stock footage, whatever sort of method that they went about with this scene, that you would at least have thought they would have closed these roads that they were filming in, and maybe not have anybody there present, or just like some people driving cars, like speeding, other sort, maybe have some extra casts for like the running scenes like they've usually have done for the Godzilla films. but they didn't do that for
Yeah,
the
I
whole
mean,
Hong Kong scenes or anything.
part of it may have depended on when they went to Hong Kong and like getting permission to film there. Where some it looked like these were very populated areas, and maybe they couldn't close them down even for a few hours, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I've always noticed them. But yeah, I mean, I'm again, like I said, I try to watch them with a little bit more of a closer eye when we discuss them for the podcast. And yeah, I mean, I noticed it. I'm just like, that's kind of funny. That bus is going towards Godzilla. They're going to get smashed or something like that. Like,
And
yeah, it's. But then the funny thing is, in some of those other scenes, they have people running. So they
right.
orchestrated some panic in some shots, but in other areas, they just filmed it as is.
Well, I think, and then too, with some of those, when they were panicking and then running off, you can at least see some of that blue screen outline in some of
Well,
those.
I noticed that it's not a big deal. I watched the Blu-ray version of this,
Yeah.
and I don't so that's part of it because like when we were discussing Return of Godzilla, I was saying there was one moment in that movie where I didn't realize it was a matted background because on the DVD version you don't notice that, and I think with the DVD
Right.
version of this film as well, I never noticed that. But
Yeah. And then one of the other things too, and I'm not even sure if they even had the time to do it or just didn't even think about it when they were in the editing phase of the film, was that when Godzilla was walking away from the main part of Hong Kong, there with Hong Kong in the background, then Godzilla in the foreground, and you can see some of the smoke. It's just a little bit of details, a little bit of nitpicks. Is that it seemed like they didn't really do a full on cutout with, or at least have used a blue screen for it, where like when smoke goes overlaying the buildings, you don't even see the building at all. It just seems like they just cut around where the smoke was,
oh,
floating around and all the such. So it's just a little bit of nitpick that I've just seen when watching like the Blu-ray version
yeah.
of the film, and then it seemed like when Godzilla was walking by with one of the famous buildings in Hong Kong, it just seemed like it just appeared out of nowhere or gradually appeared, and it seemed like with some of the cutouts and the such that I've just really noticed with the matte background or whatever was going on, it just seemed like it just suddenly appeared when
Yeah,
Godzilla was
I
coming
mean,
towards it.
I will say you're picking a lot of nits here. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's just one of the things I just noticed. So
yeah, I mean, you aren't wrong. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, yeah, you're picking nits. But I, at the same time, I think I don't know a ton as far as like budget and stuff. I'm sure part of it was budget. I also think part of it is just technical limitations that they had at the time as well. I think for what they were trying to do, they did a pretty good job.
yeah, not nonetheless, yeah, it's the film was good, really good as is, but it's just after watching this film for over the years and then with us, like what you mentioned earlier or not long ago, that when we review these films, we have more keen to trying to at least
We're
find,
watching them more carefully.
yeah, seeing them more carefully and at least sort of discovering things that we've never seen before, even after watching these films for after 2 decades or more.
Yeah. One thing too I thought was really funny, especially given today's culture. And I've known this line existed in the film. I just never really thought about it. But when they're talking about Godzilla's condition there at G4 shortly after the Hong Kong attack, they talk to an American scientist about Godzilla's condition, and he holds up a 3.5 inch disc, and he goes, I found a thesis by a college student over the internet. It's an accurate portrayal about an interesting thing about Godzilla. And I had to laugh at that because, first of all, he just said like 30 seconds earlier, they didn't exactly know what was going on with Godzilla, but they had a theory. and they said that this paper was accurate. So I'm like, wait a minute, how do you know if it's accurate if you yourself aren't sure what's going on? But the biggest thing I thought was funny was that they got it off the internet and they said, hey, it's factual. I just thought that was the funny part. I'm like, you can't do that today.
Well,
make sure things go through gatekeeping to make sure everything's presented.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily sort of go about that. But then the other thing I would like to point out is that even though they say it's factual, but then at first they say that they didn't know anything of what's going on. Yet they say that it's factual. Then it's like, what's going on?
If it's factual, then that means you technically don't need that information because you already knew it.
Then you
so
should
how
have
can it
mentioned,
be interesting?
Then you should have had information to begin with instead of saying that we don't even have anything of what's going on with Godzilla.
I mean, for those who are listening to the audio version, I'm just holding up my hands and shrugging like I have no answer for that other than that's we should have taken a screenshot of that, but like there's something wrong with how that dialogue was written. There's just like just some stuff that wasn't that dots were not being connected as they wrote that particular scene. But I will damn that section of dialogue more so than I will any of the effect sequences in that Hong Kong destruction.
I would say to myself, whoever was the writer for the film, I don't even know.
Kazuki Omori.
Okay, so then they probably don't even realize what was going on.
Well, here's the thing. I would lay off of him until you see the subtitles. I have not done that, so I don't know.
I haven't either. So
because I have noticed with some of these Godzilla films, the dub can sometimes be drastically different than what's the sub.
Maybe what I should
maybe it makes sense in the subtitle.
Maybe I should rephrase. Whoever's the writer for the dub version.
At least that, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I shrug and put up my hands. I don't know what to say about that other than whoever did it, whether it was indeed Omori's fault, which I don't know because I have not watched this with subs, or if it was the dubbers, which very well could be the case because as we found out with dubbing over the years, they sometimes either try to match lip movement or sometimes when it comes to trying to translate between Japanese and English, sometimes there aren't suitable words for one or the other.
But I know with this film, the guy that was speaking there, he was actually talking in English, but I don't know if that was like his actual voice.
No, or if he's dubbed. Oh. He's dubbed. Oh yeah, he's dubbed because that same voice is used throughout many of those Heisei films. I mean, it's dubbed. I guarantee. I will bet you $100 that's.
But it still seemed like he was at least still talking in English the way.
He's English. Yeah. But like for example, you've seen the Japanese cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla. When they do the submarine, when they do the submarine Seahawk scene, the captain on that sub has actually more of a higher pitched voice, whereas in the Universal American edit, he's got the typical John Wayne deep voice because he's supposed to be a tough guy, sort of thing going on. That's why. So, yeah, I mean, they'll even dub some of the Americans in these films. Like I've noticed, in that same movie, too, some of the American scientists that are on that submarine, too, were dubbed as well. And then I watched the movie King Kong vs. Godzilla, the Japanese cut. And yes, that same scientist on that sub also had a higher pitch voice. It's so funny because these guys are, we Americans, we want macho tough guys. And so they even redub these English guys to make them, we are tough guys, that sort of thing. It's pretty ridiculous how that works sometimes.
Well, and for me too, it just feels like sort of a waste of resource when you're doing something of the such. It's like, why don't you just use the original voices of those guys? Just leave them alone. Just only dub, the other characters are speaking in a different language.
I got an answer for that. And
I'm
it's
probably
one
guessing
word.
what it is.
What is it?
Money, whatever.
No, Toho.
Oh.
That's my answer. That should explain everything right there. And here's a moment where I think the movie could have tried to, at least from a character development standpoint, could have tried to dive deeper into at least two characters better. Technically four, because I got another thing coming up here in a bit. But it's disappointing that Miki Sagusa was the reason that Ken Yamane wanted to join G-Force, but then nothing is made of their relationship after he joins. It would have been great to try and develop some relationship between them over the course of the movie.
And it felt like they hardly had any interaction with one another.
And their initial reaction is when she's wondering where Little Godzilla is. And then he comes in saying, well, maybe he's dead. And then she gets mad at him for saying that. And I thought, boy, this would have been great if they could have had some tension and then gradually over the course of the movie, maybe develop. I mean, they could have developed a romantic relationship because she's the reason why he joined in the first place.
Well, it's like that would be one interaction. And then the other interaction was when they were trying to discuss of how to lure both Destoroyah and Godzilla to face off one another, and that they were in that command center with the other gal trying to come up with a plan. So it seemed like that those were the only two interactions that I can think of off the top of my head right now. And then essentially that was about it.
I mean, would it be necessary for them to develop a relationship? In the big scheme, no, because technically we watch these movies for the giant monsters. But at the same time, though, too, again, this is being nitpicky, but at the same time, I think there's a reasonable amount of criticism for this, in that from a writing standpoint, a good writing standpoint, it's a huge blunder because you get, I forget the doctor's name, but the doctor with the glasses, he goes and visits Ken, who wrote this thesis on Godzilla that the American scientist just a few minutes earlier was discussing, was interesting, and got off the internet. And he was trying to recruit Ken, and Ken initially was like, no, Godzilla's a hobby. My dad, who was the buzz cut native from Odo Island and Gojira, who got adopted by Dr. Yamane, he was saying his dad taught him everything about Godzilla. And then this professor, this guy who's trying to recruit him to G-Force, gets a phone call from Mickey, and Ken overhears this phone call, and he goes, wait a minute, is that Miki Sagusa? And he goes, yeah. And he's like, then I'll join G-Force. Let's go right now. And it's just like, he obviously has a crush on Mickey, and it goes nowhere. That's just it. Like there's nothing. There's no flirting or any sort of relationship building between the two. And I really thought, because
I think they really missed the opportunity
right.
into that. It seemed like that they were trying to set it up, but then they didn't mention anything
right. They set it up and it goes nowhere. So that's a blunder. That's a writing blunder. Mm-hmm. Second of all, because this is the final Godzilla movie and Miki Sagusa, the character, will never be in any Godzilla movie again, this would have been an interesting look at maybe seeing her trying to transition into a post G-Force life. Like, maybe Ken and her do develop a relationship, and after Godzilla dies, I guess technically Godzilla Jr. becomes Godzilla, so their work isn't done. But maybe they could transition into a life after G-Force to have a family or something. I don't know, but there's a couple ways you can, handle this.
And then the other thing too, as we're discussing about this, that Mickey was sort of like trying to, at least was being developed into a relationship in the prior film to this,
Yeah.
film, but then that didn't even go anywhere or transition into this film.
I've always assumed the guy got killed. No, not really. I'm just making that up on the spot.
I couldn't hear you. You were sort of breaking up there.
Oh,
Could you repeat that?
I was being funny and saying I always assumed the guy got killed.
but yeah, it just seemed like that they seemed to try to develop her into with some sort of relationship, but they didn't. It just seemed that it just got mixed up with the prior film. They just should have at least saved it for this film, at least, and basically develop it into some sort of relationship between her and then Ken Yamane. But it felt like inconsistency within that series, that little bits of it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we might have discussed this before on previous podcasts, and if we did, forgive me and indulge me for a moment, but if we haven't, then I'm going to just go ahead and say this right now. I know we definitely said this part on the podcast before, and in fact I just said it a couple minutes ago. Most of us watch these films, in fact probably all of us, excuse me, the carbonated water, most of us watch these movies basically for the monsters, right? We want to see monsters destroy stuff and fight each other. That's really the main attraction for us in these films. However, very few films in this franchise, not just the Godzilla franchise, but even like Gamera and your other Toho Tokusatsu films, and anybody else who has made these types of films. Yeah.
Nikatsu.
Nikatsu. Very few of these movies are going to have well-written characters. The Gamera trilogy is a series of films that I think they do pretty darn well in writing good characters and writing pretty good stories for them, trying to flesh them out and actually making stuff matter. Gojira is another one in which it's very good character writing, good character development. Mothra vs. Godzilla is another one that is pretty good. I'm just trying to think of just like maybe one more movie off the top of my head that has pretty darn good characters. We'll leave it alone for right now. But like you get the picture. Like these movies are not, most of the time are not going to have well developed characters, and you get just enough to kind of know what they're about. But like I was saying earlier, with the whole Ken joining G-Force because of Miki and the fact that he doesn't even try to pursue her or anything like that, from an actual critical writing standpoint, something like that is a huge blunder. And so, yeah, it's just kind of unfortunate that some of these characters, certain things are set up, but they go nowhere, and they missed out on certain opportunities, I think, to really try to flesh them out and give us more character stuff. But again, we come to these movies more for the monsters than anything else. And to kind of go along with, you know, characters not being fully developed, Yukari Yamane, and I didn't really realize it until watching the movie for this podcast, she's an expendable character. She really does absolutely nothing of importance in this film other than to serve as maybe a potential love interest for Dr. Edge. And, you know, that's what
sorry,
I'm
I just have to laugh at Dr. Edge.
I'm copywriting that name for a future like novel or something.
Or
yeah,
she
does nothing. She does nothing though. Yukari Yamane. I didn't realize it till watching this movie because I'm like, yeah, she's a news anchor and she introduces Dr. Edge to the movie because she grills him over micro oxygen and how maybe it could be dangerous. But she does nothing of importance in this movie.
Yeah, now that you mention about it, and then after thinking about it when watching this film, yeah, she doesn't really have much of an importance to the film at all.
even at the start of the movie when she grills Dr. Edge on her news broadcast, she makes it sound antagonist. She sounds antagonistic, in fact is. And the guy who plays the funny henchman in Godzilla versus Mothra, he's kind of like her gopher or whatever. And I was quoting him at the top of this podcast where he tells her, "You're a straight talker, but be careful, it could ruin your love life." That's trying to set up a potential relationship between her and Dr. Edge. And you sort of get hints of that throughout the movie, like when he saves her from the one Destoroyah aggregate in the parking lot there.
Yeah.
But then again, though, too, sort of like the Ken Miki, it never really fully develops, and it doesn't really go. This one's more developed than the Ken Miki one, but even then,
yeah, definitely.
But even then, it still isn't even that much developed. It still goes nowhere because we just get hints of this in the film, and she does nothing except talking to the camera as a news broadcaster, and it's just like, well, we know what's going on because the movie's already been showing us what's going on. Like, there's strange creatures attacking police in the Eastern Industrial District of Tokyo. And I'm going, yeah, no shit. Like, I've been watching this for the last 5 minutes. I know what's going on. Right. So she should have been a character. She should have been either a character that only showed up in just a couple brief scenes like you see in a lot of films that's just there for brief exposition purposes. Or should have been written out altogether because it goes nowhere.
Yeah, like if she was written out, there's really no other scenes that can go on without her. I mean, it can actually, the movie itself can go forward without her. Just take out some of the scenes that she was in, then I mean, it just felt like that she wasn't even there to begin with.
Yeah, and you know what could have actually made that industrial district scene more exciting and maybe tense? You could have had it where Mickey arrived there to do some studying or whatever. G-Force called her to go out there and investigate.
I think that would
have been... she gets chased
that would have been
by the Destoroyah aggregate.
That would have been better, and then like all those SWAT like team members can be part of her guards or like backup.
Send
or something
G-Force in there. Forget the police and military weapons. Send G-Force in there. Instead, G-Force started out as sort of like an extension of the self-defense force when it was first introduced a few movies earlier. And then it seems like with this movie in particular, I don't know if this was done purposefully, and I never heard a line mentioned, but it seems like it's been nothing more than a research agency at this point. I thought also they were supposed to have like certain weapons and soldiers themselves to go out and investigate and to maybe attack some of these monsters. Because even in the last movie in Space Godzilla, our two main pilots and even the crazy guy,
I would at
Yuki.
Least, I would at least say the only thing that they have created throughout this entire Heisei series is Mechagodzilla, Morgira, and then the Super X3. Like, there's at least only
the
two movies that
force.
Go ahead.
The Self-Defense Force created Super X3. Remember? Because General Aso was on the phone. He's like the head commander of the Self-Defense Force.
Okay,
and the professor with the glasses was like, what's going on? And Aso then tells him, who works for G-Fest, this professor guy.
You mean G-Force.
What'd I say?
You said G-Fest.
He tells G-Fest about this new weapon, the Super X3. So the Self-Defense Force created the Super X3, and I'm going to just quickly bring this up because I just thought of it, is a plot hole because all of a sudden they know that you can't attack Godzilla using traditional weaponry. They just found this out, and yet somehow miraculously in the span of 30 seconds, the Self-Defense Force created a weapon in the Super X3 that uses freezer weapons.
I'm probably guessing what they're trying to go with that dialogue is maybe not with explosive missiles or
Missiles.
anything of the sort, but with freezing weapons is what basically what the Mazers and the Super X3 were equipped with.
Yeah. I'm willing to let it go, but that's a plot hole. And
Somewhat.
and I'm gonna bring something that is a real nitpick with me. And I've noticed this throughout many of the Heisei films, and even some other films within the franchise, especially like the older films. Nobody can say the word. I don't want to say nobody. Most of the people don't know how to say nuclear properly. In this film, I lost track of how many times people say nuclear, and I'm like, it's not nuclear, it's nuclear. It's nuclear. It's not nuclear. It's nuclear.
Whatever.
Toho. The battle between the police and destroyer aggregates in the industrial district is very Aliens-esque, and I know this has been brought up before, and I think a couple of books, and I know it's been brought up numerous times within the fan community itself.
Mainly with how the destroyer aggregates were designed, particularly in one certain part.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But also, like, as they're going through parts of that one building, the guys with their flamethrowers, it's very Aliens like. And look, I know some people I think ding the movie because of that. I don't do that because a lot of movies will borrow certain things from other films. Like, for example, Ridley Scott, when he made the first Alien movie, one of his inspirations was a 1950s movie called It, The Terror from Beyond Space. So I'm not going to ding the movie for trying to copy something from a different film.
That one saying imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
Yeah, so it's not like Final Wars where it borrows, gosh, I don't know how many things from however many American films. So that's just almost, in certain moments, a blatant ripoff of certain films. I mean, this is child's play compared to, not the movie, but to what Final Wars does with some of its sort of almost outright blatant copying of certain films.
Mm-hmm.
Matrix.
Yeah. Basically, a lot of movies nowadays have tried to imitate the Matrix.
I mean, it's fine, but just
sometimes it just gets a little too much.
Yeah. What did you think of the effects work for the film?
The effects work, I thought it was pretty good. Some of it, at least over the years, I would say somewhat been outdated for certain parts of the visual effects. I would at least say the 3D animation graphics, as far as doing like some sort of simulator of like the 2 Godzilla meltdown scenarios, where like one was where he was exploding. I would at least say that was the best one because they showed actual stuff in there. But when it comes
blood and guts.
But when it comes to like the meltdown scenario, they use full-on CG graphics for that one, which to me, I would at least say that's out of the entire movie, I would say that's probably the most outdated part. But yeah, a lot of the visual effects, I would say, still hold up. Some of them, I know I've said it earlier when it came to the Hong Kong scene, where some of it seemed like they didn't do full-on cutouts with certain things. There, you'll see maybe bits and parts of the blue screen outline for certain things, especially if you're reviewing the film in the Blu-ray rendition. But other than that, it's really good. There are some, and then also there were some instances when they had like one of the Kaiju, or like Godzilla Destoroyah, behind like some of the foreground. You see some of the was it the height issues here and there, where like when they were showing the nuclear explosion scenario where you see Godzilla behind the National Diet Building. You see him probably like 2 to 3 times higher than probably the building that he should have been shorter with. So there's
scale issues.
Yeah, scale issues here and there. But other than that, the visual effects for this film, I would at least say, is one of the better ones in the Heisei era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think the effects by and large hold up pretty darn well. I think both computer and technical, or should I say, the traditional effects work really well. Some of the buildings, especially there towards the end, where the final battle's at Haneda Airport, there are a few moments where it's kind of meh, but by and large, I think. I really think a lot of the effects do hold up well, and I would argue that the effects that steal the scene the most in this movie are the Destoroyah, the full-grown Destoroyah suit, and the Burning Godzilla suit.
Mm-hmm.
That Burning Godzilla suit is just absolutely gorgeous. I am always enthralled with it every time I see it. Just how it's designed, where it looks
and how it executed.
Yeah, and the steam coming out, the glowing eyes, the glowing chest, and the tips of the glowing spines. The Destoroyah suit is massive. Unfortunately, it weighed so much the other actor couldn't move a whole lot in it. But the detail on that thing and just how creative the design is, I always love that Destoroyah suit.
I would at least tip my hat off to a lot of the guys that have designed these suits, both the Burning Godzilla and Destoroyah, because I would at least say that they were probably one of the better suits in the whole Heisei film. Just the way how they were designed for the movie and how that they were executed, especially the Burning Godzilla, and how other additional elements that they added on to that suit like they've never done with any other Godzilla suit, especially making it glow in a lot of the areas, and as well as adding smoke to the suit as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's gorgeous. And the one scene, I'm surprised you didn't bring this up, Godzilla's actual death.
Oh yeah,
I still think the practical effects I didn't realize it, and I've always known this, again, kind of like with that first line by that American scientist earlier in the film. Obviously I see it, but I didn't think too much about it, but I'm just like, holy crap, like when the skin is melting off like his face, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I really got disturbed by that this time.
Yeah, I would also like to know how they made some of that. Like, what were some of the
probably a wax or something like that is my guess.
I would at least say some wax, maybe some sort of like gelatin. I wouldn't say gelatin, like some sort of slime substance. The way it looked in some of the areas when they were showing the close-ups for when Godzilla's skin was melting off the bone there in areas.
I was just deeply disturbed by that more this time. Seeing, I'm just like, that's got to be painful, but at the same time, as an effect, it's executed really well. And then when they do the whole body image to show the final part of the meltdown, like the heart blowing out of him, and then the actual fully melting down of him. Sure, on some level, the graphics look a bit dated, but I still think they hold up incredibly well. Also,
well, I think too, with it holding up quite well, is that they masked that part quite a bit with some of the fog effect for it as well. And yeah, it's just really nice. And I also like how when they did sort of like a full-on shot with the military in the foreground, and then Godzilla in the background, sort of glowing in his outline there, and then all of a sudden you just see it just like deforming into like a huge pile of whatever it is, and then the smoke, and then a glowing thing coming up like in the center of where he was standing.
I'm about to cry as we talk about this right now.
But at least there's a happy ending to the film, so.
Yeah. But yeah, by and large, I think with the exception of a few moments, like there's one scene, for example, during the aggregate and military battle where there's an aggregate at the end of the hallway and one of the police officers blows it up with a bazooka and it just kind of disappears and an explosion comes out in this weird computer effect that
it's just, like a blue screen.
It's a terrible
overlay
blue
from
screen.
From what I've noticed, and I've also within that shot as well, it seemed like it was there, but then the next frame it wasn't there. You don't see any body parts whatsoever.
Jason wants all this gore. I want body parts.
I mean, well, it's a kaiju, so
I know.
It's not like a whole rated R sort of thing. So for me, it would have at least have been nice to add in some sort of detail to that. Because I mean, come on, when Destoroyah was facing off Godzilla Jr., it's like he uses his atomic ray to blast off some of the parts from Destoroyah there. So I mean, yeah. What else? I mean,
yeah, my biggest thing was that it was just really weird how like the Destoroyah aggregate sort of just disappeared out of thin air, and then you have this weird explosion effect come in. Like the way they handled that particular shot, I think, in my opinion, was maybe the worst effect shot in the whole film. I mean, it's so noticeably bad. I'm just like, oh no. But yeah, I mean, by and large, though, I think the effects work for this movie is pretty darn good for the most part, and most of it holds up relatively well today.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that I think we both are going to be once again talking pretty positively about Ifukube's score.
Yeah, for me, there's of course at least some of the traditional music that come back. Like the traditional Ifukube music come back for this one, but of course, redone a little bit slower this time around. But at least he still gives his own unique feel just for this film. Only, especially with the Requiem music that's used towards the end of the film when Godzilla's melting down. The theme for the movie, I think, is one of the better theme scores for the entire Godzilla
Are you looking
franchise.
at my notes?
Yeah, if you're showing them like right in front of me. But yeah, to me, I'd say it's one of the better Ifukube scores that he's ever done. I would say probably second best behind Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, which to me, in my opinion, I'm probably guessing yours too, that it was Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 is probably his best music that he's ever done for the Godzilla franchise. So I would say with his score mixed in with Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, I would say it definitely fits fairly well with it.
Yeah, I mean, like I just said a moment ago, are you looking at my notes? Like again, I think the score for this movie is great. And like I have written down here, the Requiem track, it pretty much pulls at my heartstrings every time. It's a wonderful track, and in my opinion, at least when it comes to this particular film score, I think it's the best track that's been composed on here.
And then, and then also, sadly, just just to add into, for those that don't even know, that this was essentially Fukubei's last appearance in the Godzilla
It
franchise.
was his last, yes, as far as being Maestro.
Yeah, because I think a couple of years after the film was made, he passed away.
He passed away in 2003. So it was still a little while, like 8 years later. In fact, I think this was the last film he scored ever. Period. Like he wasn't just done with Godzilla. I think he was done. Period. Like I think he retired.
As far as I know, this was indeed his final Godzilla film that he's ever composed for.
Yeah. As far as comparing it to some of his other films, I still think this is indeed in the top. I still think Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 is a slightly better score than this one. I don't think necessarily, though, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 is his best. I think it's definitely one of the best. I would say, for me personally, his best score is Invasion of Astro Monster. I really think you get a lot of the traditional Godzilla and sort of stereotypical kaiju music that most fans know. All of that is really showcased in that film, and it's updated from Gojira, because I think Invasion of Astro Monster really brought back certain marches and themes that had not been used at all in any of the previous Godzilla movies since Gojira. And Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster sort of started that. The scores between those two films, as I explained on another podcast many years ago,
that they were really popularized with those films.
Well, they are very similar, but there are differences. But I've always said Invasion of Astro Monster was actually a better score because I really thought it did certain themes and marches better. And on top of that, too, it provides more of the traditional music many of us longtime fans have been accustomed to when it comes to Godzilla music or kaiju music. And so I personally think Invasion of Astro Monster is his best. I think here are, in no particular order, I think are his best scores out of the Godzilla series anyway. I think Mothra vs. Godzilla is really good. Invasion of Astro Monster is good. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is good, but that and Invasion of Astro Monster in many ways are interchangeable, but I think Invasion of Astro Monster is better. And then I would say, then Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 in this film. So those are the 5 scores that I think are really his best. A lot of people would say, well, why didn't you put Gojira in there? Because that was the one that kind of brought out some of those marches and themes. The reason why I didn't put Gojira on there is because I think Astro Monster, when he redid some of those marches, he did them better. And when you listen to some of the music from Gojira, you can tell in some cases some of the archaic methods of bringing together a movie at that time, because you have to remember that movie was made 9 years after the drop of the bombs, and so Japan was starting to, just from an economic standpoint,
trying to
getting their footing going to building back their economy. And you can hear in some of those tracks shuffling around of people, and I think maybe even Ifukube, I forget what the little stick deal is called, but I think you can even hear that tap on the pedestal in some moments as well. I think the music is good, but I think it begins to get perfected by Invasion of Astro Monster with a lot of those themes that we hear from Gojira. So that's why I don't put Gojira in there, because I think Gojira, even though, yes, it starts a lot of those themes and everything, the presentation of it is not so great in some cases, in my opinion. So that's why I don't put Gojira in there. I find it weird that after 40 years, these Destoroyah aggregates suddenly appear and begin mutating and evolving like crazy. How does that work with the Oxygen Destroyer, though? Because, sure, Dr. Edge mentions micro-oxygen. When it's fed to animals, it can make them bigger and help solve the food crisis. But Dr. Serizawa, 40 years earlier, clearly stated that the formula suffocates and dissolves anything in its path.
Well,
I almost think the movie did some retconning here with that.
Well, and from the sounds of it too, and I've also listened pretty carefully into the dialogue of it, that from the sounds of it, that the micro oxygen that Dr. Edge made and comparing it to the oxygen destroyer that Serizawa made, that it, from the sounds of it, that they are two different things. From the sounds of it, that they are a bit similar in a way, but they are at the same time different.
But here's the thing, though.
But then when Dr. Edge was looking at when the Destroyer aggregates combined with one another, in the way that he was looking at the live feed, in the way that it was destroying things with the oxygen destroyer, he said that that this was indeed the oxygen, like the oxygen destroyer, not something that the micro oxygen would do, where the oxygen destroyer is much more dangerous.
My understanding, though, is that they were saying the destroyer aggregates appeared because they got mutated by like remnants of the oxygen destroyer.
Well, yeah,
or
maybe the oxygen destroyer from 40 years ago, but
that
not
makes
with,
no sense then if that's true.
But not using like the micro oxygen that Dr. Edge was making.
Because unless I missed something in the dialogue, and I don't know, maybe the subtitles would clear this up. My understanding was that the aggregates were the result of the original oxygen destroyer. If that's true, that doesn't make sense, because the original oxygen destroyer was designed to suffocate and dissolve material, whereas Dr. Edge's micro oxygen is different in some respects, is that it makes things bigger. But maybe did I miss something where there was a certain type of micro oxygen that either he made or was just present in Tokyo Bay, that the crustacea all of a sudden fed on that, and they just, like, did I miss something? Like maybe it was a different micro oxygen that brought these things?
I would at least say, and I would think that this is sort of the theory that I've had since this movie was made, or since first time seeing the film, was that I would at least think, even though that the oxygen destroyer destroyed
Hey, Godzilla Productions
destroyed life forms, I would at least say that even though that destroyed life forms, that there could be at least certain life forms that a lot of people didn't think that they could not be immune or could die off with it, but there could be some sort of life forms that were immune to the oxygen destroyer, maybe like microbes of the sort. So that would be sort of my theory, how the crustaceans that essentially transformed into Destoroyah were immune and sort of got mutated from it, sort of like Godzilla in a way. It's like the same concept where a lot of the life forms essentially can't take in radioactivity, and also like die from radioactivity, or maybe like certain life forms are immune to it and also mutate. I would say that's sort of the same concept when it comes to the oxygen destroyer and the crustaceans.
Yeah, I become more confused now, because the more I've thought about this, the more I'm starting to wonder if either I just keep missing something in the dialogue, or the dialogue is only telling part of the story, and maybe the subs would clear it up. Because again, like I said, I've always for years thought these aggregates were the result of the original oxygen destroyer, and I'm like, if that is true, that makes no sense, because the original oxygen destroyer suffocated and dissolved everything that was in its area. But then I started thinking with this viewing, I'm like, was there sort of like over time, as the results of the original oxygen destroyer wore off, Um, did some of the remaining chemicals turn into a form of micro-oxygen where if certain animals were in it or fed on stuff within that area it became big? Um, or did Dr. Edge do something there, which I don't think he did, but I'm just throwing out some possible ideas. But it just has gotten confusing because I'm like, okay, if they're talking about the original Oxygen Destroyer, then that's bogus because that's not what the original weapon did. But then I'm just like, well, maybe over time, sort of like, I don't know, with radioactivity or something, there's just, I don't know, certain things maybe change. I don't know. I'm getting confused now all of a sudden because I'm like, it makes no sense.
I think we have
me.
to go back into watching those parts again and just try to make a clear understanding of where they were trying to get at with this whole micro oxygen and oxygen destroyer concepts.
Yeah, I mean, I almost am inclined to believe some retconning was done. Again, what I need to do because I've owned the Blu-ray of this thing now for several years, and I have yet to watch it in the sub version. Maybe the subs could provide some clarity because even when I've read some of the books on this movie over the years, I don't think they've really even clarified what this is about or what have you. I don't know. Again, it's been a while. Uh, Godzilla Productions. I wonder if they were sort of created into a mutation from the original Oxygen Destroyer, and the second mutation making them destroy came from the second time. Yeah, I mean, even then, I've wondered that too, which is similar to what I've been saying. But again, if indeed they were a mutation from the original Oxygen Destroyer, that still makes no sense because that original Oxygen Destroyer was used to destroy things.
And then I know that Dr. Edge had 6 different soil samples in that one room. I don't know if some of that had the original remnants of the oxygen destroyer, but then at the same time, the original oxygen destroyer was used in the ocean. And how would they know where to locate that original location where that oxygen destroyer was released? If that were the case.
I didn't realize how much of a rabbit hole this was going to be when I started talking about it, because now I'm getting just more confused.
Thanks to you, we're now in this situation.
The mutation was heightened the second time because they were mutated the first time. Are you saying like the original Oxygen Destroyer was the initial mutation, but because more micro oxygen was released, but that they became bigger, but then where the second micro oxygen come from? Oh no, I don't know. I'm all sorts of confused now. Oh, because I know what Dr. Edge was working on was meant to sort of be like a chemical you feed to like fish and other animals and what have you to help with a food crisis. But again, if this is coming from the original, okay, so that's what you're saying. Oh no, I'm all confused. That still though doesn't make sense because again, that original Oxygen Destroyer dissolved and suffocated every living thing. My understanding, there was no like I'm just going to say that until I maybe go back and rewatch this and listen more carefully or watch a sub version of this, um, I'm going to assume the movie retconned what happened.
This could at least be my theory, is that the original oxygen destroyer was used, and probably some of those microbes were part of that 40 years ago, and that they were in the ocean, and then has since maybe still have lived, but still in their original form. And then with Dr. Edge's micro oxygen, where he says that they could increase the size, whereas some of these microbes maybe have moved around since, that original oxygen destroyer was used, and probably have moved out of that original location, maybe have lived in the areas and have grabbed from and maybe were in the soil where they have were in the soil sample that Dr. Edge took a sample of, and maybe did something with the soil with the micro oxygen, maybe didn't realize it, and then doubled the size of these crustaceans and that had some of the remnants of the oxygen destroyer in there. Maybe at least some sort of connection with.
I like what Godzilla Productions says here, saying maybe this is a creature that doesn't need oxygen. That's how it can live with an oxygen destroying beam. That's the thing is, I like that argument better, because then I can throw everything out the door as far as trying to explain what's been going on. I think that I think is the best explanation, because otherwise it's either all these really weird ideas we've been spouting off up to this point, or the movie retconned what happened. But
then it's like there has to be some sort of element of the original oxygen destroyer applied to it, because
there is the oxygen beam.
Well, yeah, but then like they could. It's like, I don't know how the micro oxygen.
I think our problem is that we're trying to explain Toho science, and Toho science, as we know, is never really scientifically accurate. So,
well, we're at least trying to sort of make a connection or a theory, but I don't even know how the micro oxygen would then transform into the oxygen destroyer within these crustaceans, which eventually transform into Destoroyah.
Maybe we aren't supposed to think about that.
We should.
But that's probably the problem. That's why we're all sorts of messed up right now. It's released from water, awakens something in their DNA that the oxygen destroyer affected, and it's smothered by the water. And it's smothered by the water. I mean, it could be. I mean, this is the best explanation I've been able to find over like 20 years since watching this movie, because I remember the first couple of times we watched this, I'm like, there was a part, and I didn't think too much about it, but just through passing, I'm like, that sort of kind of doesn't make sense. But then I'm just like, whatever, I just kind of ignored it all these years. But this time I'm like, okay, we got to discuss it on the podcast. Like, this has to be something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thanks to you, we're in this mess.
I didn't realize. I thought maybe I had missed something. Like, I don't know. Like, I missed something in Dr. Edge's exposition, or was smothered by water. It very well could be, because I remember Dr. Edge at one point, and I don't know how important this is to this explanation, because he said in one line that if the oxygen destroyer had not been used on the ground, Tokyo would have been a graveyard. So something about having it land on the ground and then activate it after it had landed on the ground saved Tokyo from more devastation. A moment of silence to just gather our thoughts.
I'm not going to go any further into that sort of.
I like more of what Godzilla Productions is saying, because first of all, it's simpler. It's the Occam's razor explanation, where usually, not always, usually the simplest answer is the correct answer. So I'm gonna go with that because at least in the dubbed version, to me nothing makes sense. Like I said, unless I missed a line, but I've been watching this movie uh, pretty much once a year for at least that for over 20 years. So and in a few times, more than that. So I've seen this movie over 20 some odd times, and I don't remember any sort of line that uh, really, fully explain that properly to at least make it sound halfway sense. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Anyways,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with
I
Godzilla
think we spent
Productions
way too.
explanation.
Yeah, we spent way too much on that part.
Yeah. So I'm gonna move on to like the next thing I wanted to bring up was I've always found it disappointing that the final battle wasn't more in the heart of Tokyo with all the skyscrapers around the kaiju because I think it would have made for a more impressive high stakes finale. But I'm
Uh,
sure
and
the budget didn't allow for such a
and then
set piece to be
also
constructed.
and then also they only just had one confrontation, and that was towards the end
Oh
of
right,
the
Kaiju
film.
Christmas.
And that it was towards the end of the film, and it wasn't quite as long as your usual kaiju fight. I mean, you had essentially Godzilla Jr. facing off against Destoroyah there, and then after that, when Destoroyah goes into his final form, that was then and when both Destoroyah and Godzilla faced off, and that was the only time in that entire film where they faced off was towards the end of the film there. So they
At
didn't have.
Haneda Airport, which it didn't make for impressive visuals. Um,
Yeah, I would
that's one of
at
my
least.
problems. But like I said, I think budget probably played a huge part in why.
And I think too, it was in that sort of area where there isn't as much buildings around the area. You just had maybe like your sort of small to mid some high rise buildings there, and then you had the bay there where the Haneda Airport is located right along the Tokyo Bay area, and then you had like some of your smaller man-made islands there. So I can see why where they might have not had a whole lot of budget to work off of for that, and as well as not a whole lot for maybe 2 to 3 kaiju confrontations where they usually have done in the past films up to this point, where they just only had Godzilla Jr. versus Destoroyah, and then essentially Godzilla versus Godzilla round one.
Yeah. I wanted to quickly just add a quick note on that where you know how earlier in the movie we were talking about some issues with foreground uh, deals with the Hong Kong attack. I found one scene here at the Haneda Airport really kind of goofy, where Destroya is dragging Godzilla, and then there's this one shot where in the foreground um, there are planes getting ready to go on the runway and take off. I'm just like, is that supposed to be intentionally funny? I don't think so. But again, it's just like airports running as normal. Oh, there go a couple kaiju in the background fighting.
Well, you would at least thought that you wouldn't see any movement going on in
I would
the
like
airport.
for an updated Destroyer movie, actually.
Yeah, but you would at least have thought that there wouldn't have been any like movement going on. You should have at least seen mostly standstill, maybe like actual practical, like maybe models of like planes and such there in the foreground. But of course, they probably didn't have a big studio lot to accommodate for that. So it's fortunately that they probably had to use some sort of matte or blue screen for the foreground there. So yeah.
Yeah, I just I just am a little disappointed by that. And here's the one thing though that I am even more disappointed in than just the fact that oh, you always thought it was supposed to be funny. I hope you're right, Godzilla Productions, that I hope it was supposed to be considered funny. I don't think it was, but I've always thought it was comedic. But the thing I'm most disappointed in is the fact that Godzilla never finished off Destoroyah, that the self-defense force with the Maser cannons and the Super X3 finished off Destoroyah, because Godzilla, he gets in several big hits with his beam at Destoroyah there right before it gets fully destroyed by the self-defense force, but he never totally takes out Destoroyah, and I always felt cheated by
that. And then that, but then also it's like with the freezing weapons that the military were using throughout this entire film, that they were essentially the most effective against Destoroyah, which is amazingly sort of a shocker that they didn't even bother totally using it against. Well, they sort of did, but for some reason that they just they never even really full on used them. Well, it's the aggregates before that they combined to make one Destoroyah.
Well, that's because, do you remember that one scene with Dr. Edge where he's committing the experiment where they find at minus 183 that micro oxygen liquefies? That's when they use it. So that part of the movie is used to set up the ending where the self-defense force.
But wasn't that before they were battling against the aggregates?
I think that was after, I think.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
I think it was after.
Because if it was before,
because they did use some of those lasers right before the aggregates became the real big flying Destoroyah, because then they retreated and then they're like, wait a minute, micro oxygen is off the charts, and then boom, here comes the flying Destoroyah.
Well, it turned into like the crab form, and then it flew off.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's somewhere at that point in the movie in which it takes place, but that also, I think, more importantly, was supposed to set up for the self-defense force to ultimately defeat Destoroyah. But the fact of the matter is, look, this was supposed to be Godzilla's last Toho movie for quite some time, and they should have left that alone in terms of the whole micro oxygen liquefies at 183, because then they wouldn't have had to follow through on that. That's so funny. They follow through on that darn minus 183 liquefaction of micro oxygen, but they couldn't follow through on Kenya Mane and Miki Sagusa hooking up. Shame on you, Kazuki Homorai, for leaving at least plot threads dangling while you follow through on others.
But then it's also the other thing that you mentioned about earlier. We're here for the kaiju stuff. So I know. It sort of ties in with the kaiju stuff.
I know, but they should have left that alone, because this is Godzilla's final quote unquote film. And the thing is in a movie like this where you have a big bad villain like Destoroyah, I mean, this is a brutal villain. This is a villain that kills Godzilla Jr. and then, uses its horn to slice up Godzilla a couple of times. This is just a brutal villain, and I wanted Godzilla to kill this thing. Because this thing is sinister. I mean, look, imagine this, like something kills your child. Don't you want to kill that thing that killed your child? Like, you would think from a story standpoint, spoiler alert, like in the new Rambo movie, his niece gets killed by these drug lords and Rambo goes after and kills these guys utterly. It's like, that's satisfying. It's like, that's what I wanted to have happen here. you have this big bad villain in Destoroyah, and you want to see uh, you want to see Godzilla kill him, but then on top of that, this thing kills his son, and as a result, you also uh, want Godzilla to kill Destoroyah because of that as well. I mean,
I think they were sort of trying to portray that in a way, but then at the same time, Godzilla is in a state where he's getting close to being in the meltdown phase. So I think there is part of that that's sort of into play with that, like where he was trying to get some of that energy, like when he's angry after his son is killed from falling from so many feet up in the air. But then at the same time, he's, dying. So I think there's some sort of elements playing into that too, where he's like angry, but then at the same time he's dying. So he's trying to, at least trying to get, probably doesn't have a whole lot of energy trying to go after.
He's got a lot of energy. He's releasing energy like crazy.
Well, in that sort of sense, yeah. But as far as physical energy.
Well, I mean, he's got enough energy because one of the moments I really like, I love this battle. I mean, with the exception of Godzilla not killing Destoroyah, I really like the battle for the most part because one of my favorite moments is when they're doing some hand-to-hand combat and Godzilla splits open that part of Destoroyah's chest and he claws at it and all this blood is splattering and Destoroyah's even spitting some of it out. That's one of my favorite moments during that battle because it's like, yeah, kill that thing, it's that part is very satisfying because like you said, he's enraged and like he's just like, I'm gonna kill you, and just beating away at him and blood spurting out. There's your gore, Jason, you gore hound.
Well, and then towards the end, when Godzilla is getting close to meltdown phase, where you see like his dorsal fin starting to melt, and then you see like that huge wave of radioactive energy spewing out from his dorsal fins. Then that's where like he has like his atomic ray goes into destructive mode, and where you see all this explosion once he releases that, and some of that goes like tears off part of Destoroyah's like thing,
cranial thing, whatever, part of his head
or whatever, part of his head, and you see some of that like in a shreds and like hanging from him too. That's sort of where I think most of his energy comes into play before he goes into meltdown mode.
Yeah, I like the battle for the most part. It is pretty satisfying for the most part. Like even that moment where Destoroyah breaks down into the aggregates and they crawl up on him, and he's tussling around with them and he throws a few of them off of him. The final battle, I think, by and large, is pretty darn satisfying. But it's
and the one thing to add into there is once he throws one of them off from him, I also liked where one of them just like spats out blood before, like just in midair and just before flying.
That may have been a premature blood splattering by the technical. We just need Mothra to lure Destoroyah to Antarctica and have Godzilla use a pulse and blast him into a glacier. That'd be great. Or I would love to even just see Godzilla rip him limb from limb.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But one thing I want to talk about that I think we have to talk about is Godzilla's
We're gonna go down the rabbit hole with this.
No, there's no rabbit hole this time. This I think is cut and dry. The Godzilla's death scene.
Well, I know we talked a little bit about it.
We talked a little bit about it, but I want to talk a little bit more. And we talked about the effects for it. But I want to say his death scene, because this movie made it a point on posters and trailers that
like the one on your shirt there.
Yes, right here. Godzilla dies. That's what that says. That's what it's seriously. That's what it says. Godzilla
And
dies.
then
I'm not making that up.
And then the actual poster there.
Yeah, but like in all the trailers and the posters, the big like sort of tagline, so to speak, for this movie was that Godzilla dies, and of course it was used by Toho to try to get higher ticket sales for the film, and it by and large did work for a little while. Roars into the sunset like King of the Monsters. I do like that one, Godzilla Productions. I do like that idea. um, but it's set up basically. Godzilla dies. You got to come and see this film. And I have thought about this over the last couple of days since I've seen the movie and prepare to talk about it for this podcast. In that, I never really thought about it. In that, if his death scene was not handled with such poignance and care, it would be a death scene that didn't matter. And I guess one could argue, well, because Godzilla Jr. is revived at the end, that Godzilla didn't die, even though the one individual Godzilla, yes, did die. The fact that the special effects, what they chose to show during the meltdown, the melting of the spines and the face, and then ultimately his entire body, including the explosion of his heart, and the music, if none of that stuff had been carefully thought out and orchestrated properly, this death scene would not have had such the emotional impact that I think it currently has. That it just would have been a generic death scene that we as audience members probably would have felt much of nothing about. Ifukube's Requiem, and just sort of this pain we get from Godzilla during the scene as he's melting down and everything. I mean, I cry just about every time I see this. I'm almost getting tears in my eyes right now just even thinking about it. I cried here the other day for the first time in a while seeing that death scene. But almost every time I cry when I see that death scene. My eyes water a little bit just about every time. I don't cry every time, but I get emotional a little bit. But if this wasn't done properly, this death scene would have really meant nothing. I have to give kudos to, everybody. Ifukube for creating an awesome track, and the cinematographers, Koichi Kawakita for the effects, for the spines and the melting down of the face and then the entire body, and then Tako Akawara, and anybody else involved in terms of setting up the shots and planning out how this was going to be constructed. I mean, in my opinion, it's one, if not the most emotionally impactful scenes in the entire franchise. It's one of the most emotional moments I have ever seen in any movie. And just kudos to everybody involved who put that together for creating the most impactful scene, because that's what we are supposed to feel. And like Godzilla Productions here says, I always cried when he died. It was brutal. The scene is so long, it makes you cry. Exactly. I mean, it's not just the length, it's just how it's put together as well, with the music and the shots and what they chose to show you as he dies. I mean, like I said, I'm as I'm talking about it, I'm starting to get a little emotional thinking about it. It just,
I think too, at the same time,
it's done so well.
Well, and then I think also at the same time with the ending part there where he melts down, and then you see Junior becoming an adult towards the end. I think you get quite a few like emotions mixed in with all that. I think before the meltdown, you get like the normal one, and maybe with excitement when the military takes down Destoroyah, and then you go into like the emotion of sadness when Godzilla goes into meltdown mode, and then you get like the emotion of joy and happiness that
Yeah, like
Godzilla Jr. lives at the end.
yeah, like Junior lives, but at the same time, Godzilla lives. Like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of it plays on that sort of the duality of that. It's like two things coming together that it's just like, okay, this thing isn't a complete and total bummer. Uh,
But
but
it's like at the same time where like the original Godzilla, for me, it's like maybe like the second Godzilla after like the original Gojira, like has
right,
lived
yeah.
on for like 40 years. Like there's for me, at least within this universe, there's at least three of them. With the original one, then this one that just died off, and then you got Godzilla Jr.
Hmm.
So it's like the one that has passed away has been around for basically 40 years, gone through like from that has seen many battles for many years with many life forms, and you just have been so touched with the second Godzilla that,
Yeah. Hmm.
and then of course you get the third Godzilla, and with Godzilla Jr. becoming an adult, I've always had like maybe just like a little kind of a niche sort of theory where this one has since maybe deformed a little bit to where he's like comes back for Godzilla 2000 and then like the
Well,
Millennium series.
like Godzilla Productions had here, and I think many of us had this theory originally when Godzilla 2000 was announced, where Godzilla Productions says he always thought that G 2000 was Junior, and he still wish it was true because you want to know what happens next. Yeah, I remember when Godzilla 2000 was at least mentioned that was going to go into pre-production and then production. Many of us, myself included, thought, is this a continuation of Junior? And of course, as we know, that's not true.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, too, yeah. Well, the thing is the unfortunate thing about Godzilla 2000 and really that whole Millennium series, with the exception of two movies, is that really each movie in that era is its own movie, and there's no
Mm-hmm.
continuation like you have here in the Heisei, which is a bummer because even I mean, who knows? Like, this is a whole alternate universe. So, what I'm speculating here, could be anything. But, like, assuming that was Junior, we wouldn't get a continuation of his story. Or maybe if in an alternate universe it was Junior, maybe we would have gotten a continuation. Maybe Toho would have
Like,
said, look, I don't know. But,
and then with me too, the thing with the whole the I would say the debunking part of the Millennium Godzilla being Junior is that when it comes to Godzilla versus Megaguirus, where I think that just sort of that whole theory just fell apart essentially because the Megaguirus film essentially tied into the original
well,
whole
yeah.
Gojira thing, and then so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the one hand, though, I'm kind of glad they left it alone because it's just like, it leaves it up to our imaginations. It leaves us, the fans, the viewers, to just because sometimes, like in horror movies, they sometimes say that some of the best horror is the horror that is sort of either implied or not fully seen because sometimes our imaginations come up with something that's even more gruesome than maybe what they could have shown on screen. I'm thinking it's something similar here, whereas our imaginations can just kind of go wherever and just
Mm-hmm.
sort of figure out, there's no right or wrong answer to it. Just kind of figure out on our own, what do we want to happen to Junior after that? So, um, you always, Godzilla Productions, I always thought all of them were put together. Well, other than GMK and GFW. Yeah,
Well,
the,
and
the
then
only ones that
GMX,
are,
Godzilla vs. Megaguirus.
well, the only ones that are like connected to each other are Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS. Those are the only ones that are
Yeah.
in direct connection. Otherwise, every single film is its own separate film in that era, unfortunately. But at the same time, there are pros and cons to that too. But
yeah,
well, that's the Millennium era is a complete different discussion for a different time. One of the things, though, to go along with talking about Godzilla's death scene here, and even though this isn't his final Godzilla film that he directs, because that comes with Godzilla 2000, I want to give high praise to Tako Akawara. This is a director that just does not get enough credit, I think, in the fan community, at least here in the Western Hemisphere, because Honda, has cast a large shadow, and rightfully so. The unfortunate thing is, I think there are many other great directors within the franchise, and I think Tako Akawara is one of them. And in fact, I've always thought he's sort of kind of fighting Fukuda potentially for second best director in this entire series, at least when it comes to the Japanese films. And he directed the 92 Godzilla vs. Mothra. He directed Godzilla vs. Godzilla 2. He directed this film and Godzilla 2000. Three of those four films, I think, are some of the best of the Japanese films. And Godzilla vs. Mothra is a film that, in recent years, I've really started to appreciate a lot more. I really find that its characters are more interesting than I had previously thought. I think the story is pretty good, too. What was his name? I'm sorry, Godzilla Productions. I guess I missed that when you brought. Are you talking about the director, Tako Akawara? Is that who you're referring to? The feed here is like 30 seconds behind, so forgive us for that. But yeah, I just think the director, Tako Akawara, needs to be given a lot of props here, because I just think he has done a tremendous job in putting together at least three of the, in my opinion, some of the better Godzilla films. I love Godzilla 2000. I love this movie, and I love Godzilla versus Godzilla 2. And I just want to give props because, again, this Godzilla death scene, if he and other members of the crew did not really take their time to really think this through and to put together something that ended up being as emotionally impactful as it is, it just would have been a generic death that meant nothing. And so he's got to be given props. And I hope the fan community begins to give him more appreciation. I always hate how Godzilla lost in Godzilla vs. Mothra, though. Yeah, the unfortunate thing about any Godzilla versus Mothra movie is that Mothra's always going to win, because Mothra is considered the pure good guy, whereas Godzilla is he's either going to be more villainous or more kind of in the middle,
Maybe like the anti-hero.
Yeah, that's just how it's probably always going to be. In my universe, that's not true. Godzilla kills everybody. But yeah. Unless there's some things you want to discuss, I think we can go into final thoughts.
I think with a lot of the things that we talked about, I think we are essentially.
I got actually one more thing I think is very important to discuss with this film, and that is Dr. Edge's exercise regimen. No, I'm just making that up.
It was like, I don't know if that was even part of it.
Yeah. There's a cutscene you didn't see in your version, Jason. He's doing jumping jacks on a trampoline in his underwear.
Boy, I would like to know what you're smoking.
I wish I was smoking something. But anyway, you want to go into your final thoughts and your rating?
Yeah, as far as my final thoughts, for me, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is, I know I've given this away in the earlier part of this episode, is that for me, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is one of the better films of the Heisei series of Godzilla films. I think it is held up quite well, especially with it nearing its 25th year coming up next year. I know that's probably going to be one of the main things going to be talked about in this upcoming G Fest. Was it G Fest 27? The visual effects have held up quite a bit well, except for maybe a couple things here and there, and there were some nitpicks that we touched upon in the earlier parts of the episode. The kaiju fights, even though that they were sort of in the middle towards the end of the film, I would just like to say that even though that they were just a one and done confrontation, that they still were pretty darn good. Love the visual effects parts for like the oxygen destroyer, and as well as his atomic ray, which is essentially been sort of rehashed from some of the previous Heisei films. But as far as the suits for both Destoroyah and Godzilla, and I know we mentioned this earlier, that they were designed exceptionally well and executed pretty damn good. Love the additional detail for Godzilla as far as the like a lot of the glowing parts all over the entire suit, and as well as the addition to steam in the Godzilla suit. And it's just like the suits were just phenomenal, and it's probably one of the better suit designs in the entire Godzilla franchise. The score to Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, as mentioned, also is probably one of the better additions to this. Also, with it being Akira Ifukube's last composing. Was it? What's the name?
Score.
Yeah, score to a film in his entire life for the rest of his life. I think he went out with a bang with Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, especially with the addition of the Requiem, everything. And then as far as the story, it can be a hit and a miss with the dialogue. If it was maybe like the original script, or if it was just a dub with certain areas of the film, like some plot holes or retcon. Yeah, sometimes it can be a hit and miss. There were some missed opportunities with some of the characters, how they were handled there. Also, I like the some of the character addition with trying to connect with the original Gojira 1954, how they brought back one of the main cast members from that original movie. I forget her name, but they've brought her back in this film. And then, of course, included in some like Dr. Yamane in here with his like descendants and everything. It's just, I think it's a nice addition to this film as well, tying it in with the original 1954 film, trying to bring a full circle with everything, even with talks of the oxygen destroyer and so on and so forth. It's just a really nice addition, but of course, some missed opportunities with the story and the characters, and as well as some of the writing was sort of a hit and miss. Other than that, I would still give this movie a definite buy overall, even though there are some issues with the film. But other than that, it's a film that has held up for nearly 25 years. I think it's a definite buy, a movie that you can watch so many times. There's a lot of mixed emotions here and there. It's just a really good movie, a good addition to the Godzilla franchise.
Godzilla Productions, as I'm because there's such a delay in the feed here, I would like to know your thoughts on this movie while I go ahead and give my final thoughts. Okay, so here are my final thoughts on Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Godzilla vs. Destoroyah entered the franchise being the 22nd and, for a while at least, final Toho Godzilla movie. Toho made it no secret that Godzilla was going to die and that the stakes were going to be higher than ever. The movie partially delivers on these ominous dangers by giving us a Godzilla on the verge of a horrible death that will take the world with him, and an enemy in Destoroyah whose capabilities of releasing micro-oxygen into the atmosphere are just as, if not more, deadly. We also see a couple of simulations as to what Godzilla's death would actually do to the planet should he explode or melt down. The problem here, though, is that these dangers aren't necessarily realized to a fuller extent. Sure, the self-defense force had to freeze Godzilla during his meltdown to prevent the world from going with him, but other means could have been used to show, either during the final battle or even earlier in the movie, that his condition was some serious shit. The same goes for Destoroyah. We got a glimpse of it with the aquarium and the police battle, but nothing beyond that. They could have shown part of Tokyo decimated by Destoroyah releasing a bit of micro-oxygen, or another Japanese city being lost at the hands of Destoroyah via its micro-oxygen capabilities. Such possibilities could have been used to really illustrate the actual threat of the situation at hand. It's also disappointing that the character depth is at a loss. It would have been great to see Yukari Yamane contribute something worthwhile to the plot, and to see Mickey maybe begin to transition into a post-G-Force life with Ken. I kind of stressed that was a little weird sounding.
Yeah.
Sadly, such opportunities, which were set up and hinted at earlier in the movie, are dropped. Despite those shortcomings, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah is an entertaining film, and a worthy one at that, to be Godzilla's, quote, final, unquote, movie. Destoroyah is a badass kaiju villain, and the fights between it and Godzilla Jr. are brutal. Ifukube's score delivers a knockout performance, and his Requiem track especially is the hallmark of the movie. Godzilla's death, however, is the biggest show stealer. It's painful to watch, and no Godzilla fan can say they haven't shed a tear at least once when watching this scene. The effects work is very good by and large. Perhaps the best work lies with the kaiju suits and the CG effects. The suits are gorgeous, and the CG effects haven't looked this good up to this point in the franchise. The movie is a wild ride that ends on a very somber note. It's a film that is incredibly enjoyable and worth watching. And as a result, like you, I'm saying it's a buy rating. This is a movie that is definitely needing to be watched and seen by kaiju fans. All right, Godzilla Productions. His thoughts on Destoroyah. It's pretty good. I love every one of Destoroyah's designs. I always got anxiety when Godzilla Jr. fought Destoroyah. I did too. I still think that's a little tough to watch. Not as tough to watch as Godzilla's death scene, but still tough. Each of Godzilla's deaths were very powerful and handled well. We definitely need Destoroyah to return. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that as well. This is a kaiju. This Destoroyah, along with Space Godzilla, are two of the kaiju that I definitely would love to see return in future films. Whether or not that will happen remains to be seen. And
I know there's like talks from the Godzilla community and speculation here and there where some people would like to see Destoroyah come back in the legendary MonsterVerse there when it comes to Godzilla versus Kong, but I don't know if that's gonna happen here, especially with just one heads of Ghidorah surviving.
I still think a Mecha King Ghidorah is in the works.
Yeah, there was speculation with that too, but I know there a lot of the fans in the community have thought about thinking that Destoroyah would be present in Godzilla vs. Kong, but for me, there has to be at least something. Well, maybe with the oxygen destroyer part.
No, because then there's going to be another rabbit hole. Figuring out how Destoroyah came back with this one. It's like, you are.
Yeah, so there's at least sort of the explanation there where there is sort of makes sense where Destoroyah comes into play, but as far him actually being part of the MonsterVerse, I can possibly see it with the Oxygen Destroyer from Godzilla King of the Monsters, but as him being the main antagonist for Godzilla vs. Kong, I don't think doesn't really quite make sense as of right now. But in further MonsterVerse films, if they do continue with it, it could be a possibility.
Yeah. If Destoroyah is in Godzilla vs. Kong, then, well, to put it short, rest in peace, Kong. Yeah. Although, who knows? They may give Kong some sort of weird super ape or human capabilities or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I think with that,
yeah,
I don't know. Is there anything else, like any housekeeping? What we're going to do, I just want to say this right now. We don't have a definitive date set up yet for next month's show.
You sort of broke out there.
What was the last thing you heard of?
As far as housekeeping.
Okay, well, as far as next month's episode, it is the final episode we're going to do of the year. And anybody who hasn't been with us the last, few months, we've instead of doing a podcast every other week, we're doing one a month for
personal
the foreseeable
reasons.
Future.
Yeah.
I just was trying to figure out a way to explain it, but that's kind of what we're doing. And so there's obviously only going to be one next month. We haven't figured out a date yet. My guess, if we were to try to do something, this is just speculation.
We at least talked about doing it in the middle of December.
I'm thinking right now either like the 14th or the 21st maybe, or even the 15th or 22nd. We'll figure things out and we'll let everybody know via social media what that's going to be. Skull Island Storm was there to protect him, and Kong absorbs the storm to get his lightning ability. Oh my gosh, if they pull that, I'm gonna be mad. That just sounds like something.
Or else I'll just probably laugh, especially just hearing that and how are they gonna execute that. That'd probably be hilarious.
Yeah. I would just be like, oh no, Kong is worse than Gamera. But anyway.
That would be like Gamera level power up right there.
I'm not even going to get into that. But so yeah, like typically in years past, we've tried to do a major like end of the year show where it usually goes on for several hours. And
yeah, last year's I think went close to 3.5 hours.
Yeah, and I mean, we usually cover a lot of ground. It's just some sort of big extravaganza where we kind of talk a little bit about G-Fest again. We talk about just the year in general, kind of what it's like for being a Kaiju fan, what's good, bad, somewhere in the middle, etc.
And then, too, with it next year being our 10 years, so we're going to possibly start, we haven't really talked about, start celebrating our 10 years.
Yeah, it'll be our 10th anniversary in terms of podcasting next year. Jason, by the sounds of it, isn't going to G-Fest next year.
Well, I've really thought about it.
Breaking news. I don't even know here.
Well, and then too, we've also talked about with the hotel reservation and everything, and I've looked into it, and the way that the whole reservation is set up, I can't really do much of it on my end, with the exception of one of us calling them by phone and dealing with the whole reservation ourselves. I mean, I can't change my the whole credit card information and stuff to your and everything, and taking off or adding on more people into the reservation, which seems to be odd in a way.
That sucks. So, then if you aren't going and I wanted to go, you would have to cancel it, and I would have to quickly call and
and this is
guarantee me.
And this is the whole thing that I've been really debating for the last several days since you've asked this question to me. That, and then with our 10th anniversary coming up, it would just be sort of a dickish move for me not being there and then just you being at GFest. I would almost say I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go to GFest, this next GFest.
You're going now.
Yeah. I think it would have been a dickish move, especially with it being our 10th anniversary next year. And then if it was just you and then not me, it would just felt a little bit awkward. So I would just say that I'm just gonna go to GFest, even though my percentage of not going currently was going to be at 92%.
That's a weird percentage, but okay.
Yeah.
How you figured that out, I don't know, but
I'm just going to say that I'm just going to go next year, but probably not really spend much anyways. But I would at least say from this point forward, I would say that you deal with the reservations.
You deal with
it from now on, especially with, if it's just going to be you and your and Lincoln for one of the years, and then me doing my own thing here and there. I would just at least say maybe you handling the reservation part from now on.
You'll have to show me how to do that because you've been handling this stuff for the last.
It's fairly easy. It's the only thing is you probably will need to at least have an account, because there are at times where you can rack up points and then maybe use points instead of your own credit card.
I'm not talking about IHG. I'm talking about like figuring out when the rooms are available to use the discount code. I would call them up. I would call them up by phone. I'm not going to use.
For me, it was just essentially just keeping an eye on both the GFest Facebook page and Twitter account as well, from after GFest until I think it was the middle of August when they announced the openings of the rooms and the reservation, as well as the discount code that they've released for that. So I would suggest to you, keep your eye out on those two things between
does the GFest page also tell you when registration is available?
Yeah.
Okay,
but I would at least check. I would at least check with their Twitter account as well, because it seems to me that they update the Twitter account before the Facebook page.
Well, I hate Twitter and I don't like using Twitter. I'm not
on Twitter as much too, but they have it publicly. They don't have it set to private, but I would at least keep an eye out on those two things.
Okay. So that's good to know for the future. I don't know. I don't know if you've even done this though. Could I even reserve a room and then call them later to use the code, or?
I'll show you maybe once we get off the show here, and I think I might have a share screen on here, but I'll have to show you. It's a simple process. Just go on the hotel's website, and there's like a thing where you like check in and check out, and then there's like a little box of a discount code.
Oh, okay.
It's fairly simple.
I can figure that out.
But then I would say just register a IHG account, because then you'll rack up points, and then maybe like one of the years you can use those points instead of your credit card information there. So like you can reserve a room with your points. here, because as of right now, I've racked up, I think from last I checked the other day, it was over 35,000 points. With
You're buying
IHG.
dinner.
Or at least one room a night, maybe like the next time when we go. But yeah, so I would at least register for an IHG account.
Yeah,
so
well, we'll see. But as far as, I don't know how we got off on this tangent. But,
yeah, but yeah, as far as the
oh, we were talking about G-Fest. We kind of talked about G-Fest towards, but that's one of the things we kind of typically do. But we'll kind of work out some ideas. Jason and I haven't really discussed too much, and we both have been kind of floating around a few ideas. We haven't settled on anything definitive yet. We've been thinking about maybe trying to get some old guests we haven't had on the show on. We don't know if we're going to do that, though. But then it could just be another show where we just kind of go on talking about so many different things that are Godzilla. I may even try to maybe see if I could watch like all the supplemental material on this Criterion collection, perhaps. Maybe even check out all the films. Maybe that's a big order, but oh no, I bent it.
And then I've tried to plan to finish up was it Johnny Sacco and his flying robot?
It's here because I think how long?
Probably close to a year. But I think
it's 26 episodes.
I know, but I think I'm on the last disc of that entire series. So I would like to try to finish that up before the end of the year and talk about it and be done with it. so I would like to at least get that done and over with. And I would like to try to watch Jumborg Ace, hopefully, and try to review that. But as far as that goes, and with me as well, I don't think that's probably going to be a low probability, but I will try my best to do that.
Yeah, one of the things I may try to do too, and little did Jason know that during the course of this recording, I actually pre-ordered Ultraman Orb and Ultraman Geed.
Good. You need to see some of the newer stuff.
What I might try to do is at least watch the movies for each one. I'm not going to be able to make it through the series of either one. I don't have the time, but maybe at least watch the movies for each of those and then come back and talk about those.
Well, I know I haven't seen the movies for both of those. I've only just seen the TV shows, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the way it sounds like we're going to just try to just watch a bunch of stuff and consume a bunch of stuff and come back and just kind of give our thoughts on certain things. I'm trying to think.
And then, of course, we usually do our award, like our little award ceremony thing of like the best movie of the year or best score.
Good production.
According to I'm
going to take your word for it.
According to our opinions, at least, because like in our episode, like our final extravaganza episode from last year, our best movie of the year for that year was Rampage. For those of you,
that's right. I forgot we had done that.
Yeah. So we should probably try to come up with certain categories for our little award ceremony thing here. But yeah, that's sort of the thing that we usually do.
Godzilla Productions. If Geed's your favorite series, I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire on that. I'm gonna make sure Geed's.
I would agree with him. It is a pretty good Ultraman series. But as far as my personal favorite, according probably to say the more recent, newer Ultraman shows, for me, I probably would have to say, oh gosh, so many good ones from the new ones. I probably would have to say the Mabius. Ultraman Mabius was probably one of the good ones. I would say with that one, story-wise, it was a really good one. Yeah, I probably have to say Ultraman Mebius is probably one of the better, my favorite newer Ultraman shows by far.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant just because I've seen some of these at G Fest in the hotel room over the years, and it's like I don't hate them. It's just not my cup of tea. Like I love the original Ultraman because it kind of it reminds me an awful lot of like the Showa Godzilla era, which is my favorite era. There's just something about the goofiness and the craziness of some of the stories and the monsters and the action that gradually over time, like we saw with Godzilla and even to some extent Gamera, and like what I've seen a little bit of with the few new Ultraman stuff I've seen. Um, you know, there's just something about the older stuff that it's just like we're just gonna throw everything at the wall and it's all gonna stick. We're all gonna make it work. I like the older stuff more.
Like it has that certain charm to it.
There's just a charm to it that, in my opinion, I think is absent from a lot of newer stuff. Now, granted, I think my opinion is changing an awful lot on the Heisei. That's not to say I never thought some of it didn't have charm before. It's just that I think a lot of newer stuff, because it's so new, you don't have quite the nostalgia to it yet because obviously it's brand new. You don't have as much of a history with it yet. But over time, as the years go by and you watch the stuff more, then you develop a history. Then I think that's kind of when the charm comes about. It's just kind of like with us. Like when we first became fans, you know, we loved the movies that we first saw and we didn't really think too much about it. But then as the years go by, we're like, yeah, like I really like King Kong versus Godzilla because that was like the fourth or fifth Godzilla movie I saw. Like, then, you know, that sort of thing. But,
and then I was the one that introduced you to Gamera, but then it took you a while too, just to get into the whole the Gamera bandwagon as well.
Yeah, I had that.
I think I'm usually the one that sort of branches out a bit more and gets into a lot of these things, and then it seems to take you a little bit to get yourself adjusted to some of these oddities.
Well, Godzilla Productions says new monster from Ultraman, Taiga, Goro, Thunder, very much like an old monster. You really should check them out. It's based off of one of the most
Taiga, that's
Kaiju from the Showa era. I know I need to check this stuff out.
Yeah, Taiga's the one that's after RV.
You tend to branch out into things like manga and shows. I tend to branch out more in the movies. I do a little bit of shows. Because I'm always introducing movies to you, you're always introducing manga and shows to me.
Well, some of his movies too, like Gamera. That's all movie based.
I know, yeah, but that was like years ago. That's because back then I was just like, Gamera's a cheap man's Godzilla, like, you know, darn you, Gamera. You know, like I just had this sort of. You know, I just really was, I hate a Gamera because I'm like, hey, you know, you're just a knockoff. Why are you in my life? Like, you know, that sort of thing. But my opinions on that have long since changed. But yeah, like part of it for me when it comes to Ultraman, outside of like the newer stuff, it's just harder for me to connect to. A lot of it though, too, is just because there's so much Ultraman that it's just hard to keep up with.
It's a really expansive universe compared to Godzilla and Gamera.
Much of it. Like for me, I love the original Twilight Zone series, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like that's contained in 5 seasons. That's sure they made in the 80s, but that's like a remake, reboot sort of thing. And then they are doing it again right now on CBS All Access. But they're their own things. They're contained in their own sort of universe, so to speak. So like I can contend with that. That's not a big deal. But like Ultraman is just, it's so big and it's so hard to keep up with. And
yeah, it's a complete different monster.
And I don't have the time to do a Crunchyroll sort of subscription to watch this. I don't have the time. It's hard enough for me to do some of this other stuff.
I probably wouldn't even bother with it with was it Mill Creek Entertainment bringing out the entire Ultraman library.
RB was pretty bad. I never heard much about RB.
Yeah, I'm sort of surprised that Crunchyroll or Verve, whichever, well, it's by the same company, that they didn't bring out
because it was bad, like
that series. Because because I mean they started like doing it continuously with Ultraman X and then with Orb and then Gi, but then they didn't like renew with RB and then through Taiga, which is the most recent show.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would at least like to see RB. It would be nice. So I'm not entirely sure when they're going to be bringing that out. I think they made an announcement on Mill Creek, like on their little advertisement. I'm not entirely sure when that they were going to do it, if they announced they were going to be releasing RB.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I still bought like a couple of Ultraman movies from 2, maybe 3G Fest ago that I haven't watched, and I still have some of the TV series like Ultraman 80, Ultraman Ace, and all that that I bought over the last 2 to 3 years that I have not really gone through yet either.
Yeah, because I know
So-
I bought I used to have like the Funimation, like the early Funimation version of Ultraman Tiga, which is like the one that started off the whole current Ultraman, like the modern Ultraman nowadays. I only just had was it 3 of the 4 discs, and I remember, and I remember telling you that someone was selling the 4th disc on like eBay and Amazon, but they were asking for like a ridiculous amount for it, and I was like, that's just not even worth it. So like just this past G Fest, where I just bought like the ripped version of Ultraman Tiga, so I can at least finish off the entire series. So I can at least try to review it, although I probably will have to rewatch it here and there just to give my overall take of Ultraman Tiga. And then, of course, you also gave me Ultraman Taro, your ripped copy version of that one too, a few months ago.
Is Tiga the first Heisei Ultraman? Jason can't see the YouTube chat because he's checking, was it a Twitch chat or whatever?
Yeah.
So he can't see this, but yeah, he's saying Tiga's the first Heisei Ultraman.
Yeah, it is. It is the first Ultraman in the Heisei and has since been continuing on from Tiga.
I hate this delay. It's such a long delay. We're like, our feed, at least on YouTube's like 2 minutes behind. Like, anyway, we keep going down a rabbit hole. You talk about a rabbit hole. We're talking about the final episode of the of the year. We keep going down these different rabbit holes. We talk about hotel reservations and now Ultraman.
Yeah,
but yeah, I would love to watch any sort of Japanese TV show. The problem is that this time of the year I like to watch a lot of Christmas movies, so I don't think I'll be able to have enough.
Here, yeah.
I don't think I'll have enough time to go through anything. We'll see. Time will tell. But what we'll do is we'll work out some of the logistics. I think one of the most important things is just figuring out a date, so we'll try to figure that out. Shut up, kids. We'll try to figure that out, and then we'll just kind of figure out too, like, as far as content. Like, I think the more we sit here and talk about this, because we've spent, gosh, like 15, 20 minutes at least on this.
Yeah, we're actually getting close to 3.
We don't know how to close out a pod. That if there's one thing you can give us a 1-star review on iTunes for, it's because we don't know how to close out podcasts properly. But yeah.
So I would at least say trying to end out our episodes and stuff. I just want to bring...
El Rey didn't do Godzilla a year or 2 ago. No, I'm going off of Godzilla Productions comment here. Yeah, because it was a year or 2 ago, El Rey didn't do Godzilla for Christmas. They did Nightmare on Elm Street, which I thought was the weirdest thing. But they think Nightmare on Elm Street is also a Christmas film series.
But I would just at least like to try to close out this episode, with this here. Make sure to subscribe to us on these following podcast networks: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and TuneIn as well. And then also follow us and subscribe to us on these following streaming networks, which is YouTube, Twitch, DLive, and Periscope as well. And you can also like and subscribe to us on these following social networks that you see here. And you can also find us over at DaiKaijuNetwork.com, where we also archive our podcast episodes, both video and audio forms as well. So there you go.
Yes, and please review us. 5 stars would be nice.
Or thumbs up.
Yeah. And then please, if you can tell your friends about us too. I would assume if you tell your friends about us that you like us. Otherwise, you probably would be like, no, F those guys. But, but that's kind of what helps our podcast grow and all that fun stuff too. Because we would like to. One of the ideas, though, just a quick idea, and I don't think we're going to do this, but this is I'm sort of mildly joking about it, but I think it would be fun for us to do at some point. I always thought one of the things we could do. You're going to like this. You're going to like this. I always thought, and this is an idea I've had over the last few days. I thought it would be a great idea if we marathoned the anime trilogy and did it live on YouTube.
Well, did we do commentary on?
No, we didn't do commentary on any of them, not the anime ones.
Okay.
Because remember, we just got those. And the only ones we've done commentary on since G-Fest have been the Monsterverse films.
If we do this, I probably would say maybe wait until January, like the beginning of the year.
Because let's see, the first film is like an hour and a half, I think. Second film's an hour and 40 minutes. Last one's, I think, an hour and a half. So you have 3.5. You have 4.5, 5 hours.
Oh, God.
Roughly.
That would be like our longest episode ever. Holy shit. We'll have to
thank you, Godzilla Productions. Yeah, that would greatly help us out if you could spread the word, share posts or anything from our Facebook page or other social networks that
please do
accounts. Yeah, I
really appreciate it.
Part of it's our fault. We don't do a whole lot to advertise. We don't spend enough. We don't spend enough money, really advertising our pages and stuff like that. But part of it is just because we are afraid that if we advertise too much, people are going to expect a lot more. And because, like we've said before many times, on this podcast, I'm really busy raising 2 young kids, and Jason's busy with work, and he's wanting to do some other things too. But I would like for us to do more. It's just
and two, we
just isn't going to work out right now.
And two, we sort of consider this thing as our hobby most of the time.
Yeah. But
so that's sort of the reason why we haven't really done too much with it. And then two, we also said that we try to prevent this as being our job, being our full on time job.
But yeah, one of the things I thought about doing too is doing more writing on our website. I think the last time I did that was earlier in the year when I did a review on the Godzilla figure.
That's also one of the things that we've been lacking into, is that we haven't really done much with our website, except for me adding pages just dedicated to describing a little bit about our episodes, and that's essentially about it. I know I have some screenshots and stuff ready to do a review. Yeah. A review on the Godzilla Defense Force mobile app game. I've been wanting to do a review on that for a while now. and just haven't really gotten around to it as of yet. But
yeah, I need to go through and I need to figure out what movies I've already reviewed. I'm going to try to do some more reviews, and I'm just going to try to do some general posts as far as just thoughts on various movies or shows or whatever. But yeah, I'll try to do some of that. Would I do a reaction to a Godzilla versus Kong trailer? Well, honestly, I'm probably asking 3 years too early, but still. Um, I don't know if we'll do that. We haven't done anything like that in the past.
I know we've reacted or made
we
our
usually
response
do it like on
to
the
trailers.
Well, what we've done in the past is we'll post something usually on our Facebook page and just say, "Oh, hey, check this out." But typically, we don't talk about that until the next podcast episode. That's just kind of how we've done it.
Yeah.
Again, trying to get Jason and I together, because there's actually quite a bit of work that just goes into trying to do a live stream for something like this. And just the fact that we're busy doing our own thing, it's not that easy getting us together like spontaneously. But yeah, I don't think that'll happen. We'll probably react to it whenever the next episode happens. That's probably what's going to happen.
Because I have a feeling with the way things are going with Godzilla vs. Kong, and with the trailer having, for some reason, hasn't come out yet. I'm almost thinking that they're trying to wait between Thanksgiving and Christmas time for the trailer to come out, because then that's when a lot of people are at home celebrating with family, and a lot of the eyeballs are on the TV because, you know, with Thanksgiving you got football and everything, the Thanksgiving parade, and then with Christmas, you know, you got your family, you're celebrating with family, you're at home watching maybe like some Christmas specials on TV or the Christmas parade, everything. So I'm guessing they're going to be waiting until around that time of the year and then release the trailer, so then they can at least get some eyeballs and some attention to the film itself.
Yeah.
And then also, like I was watching a YouTuber. Yes, I know that like Avengers Endgame, it didn't start marketing and everything 4 months before the movie came out. So I'm probably guessing they were trying to do something like that.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you to Godzilla Productions for listening in on us and joining the conversation. It's been great. I always enjoy having you here. A reminder to everybody, too, you can join us on our YouTube feed and other feeds that we have set up. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on the various podcast hosts that we are connected to. Visit us at kaijunetwork.com. And we will keep you posted as far as what we're going to do next month for our final episode of the year.
Yes, so just stick around and we'll let you know when that time will be next month. So,
all right. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.